This kid is only 13 years old, but his mindset already surpasses 30. At a family banquet, he doesn't take his eyes off someone. His stare is intense and unwavering. It's a kid the same age who looks completely harmless, but Yuri knows exactly what he will become. A ruthless traitor. He is the reason an entire kingdom fell, so Yuri has no intention of showing any mercy. He challenges the boy to a duel. Yuri immediately scuffs the ground to kick up sand. He throws it in his opponent's face, because chivalry is for those with time to waste. He follows up with a kick to the chest. The attack drops the boy straight to the ground before anyone can even object. His defeat was already sealed. He lets the kid go this time. It's only because he is still a child. But next time, things will be different. Because in another life, this kid destroyed everything Yuri loved. This little menace is capable of taking down seasoned knights. His name is Yuri Briol. He's the third prince of Briol, and he has just been reborn into his past. In his other life, he was a washed-up mercenary. He desperately wanted to die in battle, but he couldn't even manage that properly. His life had been a series of failures. He lost his kingdom. He lost his family. He also lost his girlfriend, who was the princess of the enemy nation. She decided love was just another word for classified intel. She used their relationship to help her nation invade his kingdom. The betrayal was absolute. In the end, life beat him down completely. An old friend found him defeated on the battlefield. He was kind enough to shove a sword through his chest, free of charge. It was an act of pure generosity. Yuri finally got the death he was looking for. But instead of the hell he deserved, Yuri opened his eyes again. He was 13 years old, and his father was alive right next to him. This is a second chance he is not wasting. Every night in his past life, he spent his time gambling at the casino with his friends. This includes Hernando, the court mage, who insisted they leave before they were late again. But trouble starts when some men accuse Yuri of cheating. He quickly makes it clear they shouldn't mess with someone like him. The problem is, they don't believe he is royalty and take the chance to insult the king. They call him a fool for provoking the empire and making the war even worse. As you can guess, Yuri does not take that well. He beats them badly. He leaves the casino floor covered in blood. This outburst makes him late for a meeting. He has an appointment with a very important woman. Her name is Trina Ivarna Grandshain. She is the princess of the enemy empire. Ivarna complains that sneaking here to meet him took a lot of effort. She warns him again to be more careful with what he does. Fed up, Ivarna throws the necklace he gave her to the ground. She tells him to give it to some other woman he actually trusts. With that, she turns and walks away. Left alone, Yuri wonders how he can get her to forgive him. He knows it's going to be really hard this time, but he has no idea their entire conversation was overheard by someone with bad intentions. After that night, the shaky peace between both sides finally breaks. The Empire stops making simple threats and starts taking border territory through small raids. One night, Yuri wakes to screams and destruction. He discovers the Empire has invaded his kingdom. That's when the tension turns into a real war with no end in sight and countless losses. The kingdom's biggest loss is the disappearance of his father, Fiore Varelli, known as the strongest man on the continent. With Fiore gone, the war starts leaning in the Empire's favor as they win battle after battle. At first, Yuri thinks it's just luck, until he realizes Ivarna betrayed him, using the secrets he told her to help the Empire strike when his kingdom was weakest. Even with all the proof, he still wants to trust her, but a note with the word sorry is all the confirmation he needs that his kingdom's fall will be her fault. Once everyone else had fallen, Yuri was the only member of his family still standing. They even surround him with dozens of enemies. And though he's ready to die, his few remaining allies step in to sacrifice themselves for him. They say that as long as he lives, the Brill family still has a future. Carrying the weight of his entire people, Yuri has no choice but to run. He hides like a rat in abandoned houses, wondering what happened to his father. He doesn't know if there is still hope for his return, or if the Empire had already killed him too. Just as he's losing hope, an enemy knight finds him. But the knight tells him the Empire will pay for its sins someday, and that there's still time to escape. He urges Yuri that if he wants to live, he has to run. So Yuri keeps moving, holding on to the idea of revenge, but it doesn't take long for reality to hit him. Everyone he cared about died because of this pointless bloodshed. All that's left is for him to keep fighting until someone finally kills him so he can see his loved ones again. And that brings us back to the present, where after another reckless battle, he's cornered. A knight stands over him, sword at the ready. The knight tells him a selfish man like him doesn't deserve death. Then, he calls Yuri by his real name. The knight blames him for the kingdom's destruction, and the shock grows when he removes his helmet. It's Lauren, one of Yuri's old subordinates. He was the first person who gave his life to save him, a man who should have been dead for years. The shock leaves Yuri frozen, unable to move even when Lauren draws his sword. The supposedly dead knight leaps at him. He drives the blade straight into Yuri's chest. Yet the death he wanted so badly still can't ease his guilt. His only thought is how much he wants to go back and fix everything. Then something happens, and he opens his eyes to find himself in his younger body. At that moment, a voice says it can't believe he slept for 3 whole days. When Yuri turns, he comes face to face with his father, the very man whose disappearance led to the kingdom's downfall. His first thought is that they both ended up in hell, which feels fitting after all his sins. His father jokes that it would make sense for him to be there too. After all, for all his talk of honor, he did live a pretty messy life. Of course, the king follows that up by smacking Yuri on the head and telling him to stop talking nonsense. He expected to see sinners and demons mocking the awful fate he earned. Instead, he's facing his father and brothers, the people he loved most in the world. The shock of it all is so much that he faints. He realizes that he has truly gone back in time, all the way to when he was just 13 years old. There is no doubt in his mind that life has given him another chance. That's why he decides to begin a very strict routine, determined not to let history repeat itself. He gets up early to train, where he's greeted by his personal maid, Emma, but he remembers a future where she was killed right in front of him. He could only watch as she died before his eyes. He was completely unable to protect her. Haunted by those memories, he asks Emma to hit him. After making sure she won't be locked up for treason, she questions his strange request. He insists, feeling like he deserves it as penance. She does the job so well that he shows up for training with his whole face swollen. The others can't help but start laughing at him. His teacher says nothing about his face. He simply continues their training, fighting him again and again. Yuri remembers this teaching style from his past life. Back then, his teacher said he had talent but no discipline, wasting his potential to become the kingdom's strongest. Remembering his past failure, Yuri asks his teacher to start from the beginning. He requests to be taught properly from now on. He promises to give it everything he has. His teacher is surprised by the sudden change in attitude but agrees. The shift in atmosphere is instant. His teacher's entire expression and stance change completely. He declares that from this moment on, the real training begins. The teacher then attacks with overwhelming force. Yuri is immediately pushed back onto the defensive. He struggles under the pressure and asks for a little mercy. He realizes he completely forgot something important about his teacher. In his youth, he was known as the Sword Demon. A couple of hours later, an exhausted Yuri drops to the ground. He's shocked that this is the level of training he missed out on in his past life. He is thankful for his mercenary experience, which is the only reason he wasn't beaten senseless. Still, he can't complain, knowing this is the only path to improvement. His teacher is the most shocked of all, wondering how Yuri blocked most of his attacks and when he got this good. Their session is interrupted when Emma rushes in, desperately looking for Yuri. She tells him he must meet Count Jonas, who has arrived with his son. Upon hearing this, Yuri's expression darkens. The problem is that the Count's son, Got, is the exact man who betrayed the kingdom in his past life. This time, Yuri has no intention of letting him get away with it. During the meal, Count Jonas points out how much Yuri has changed since he last saw him. He compliments Yuri's improved manners and physique. He repeatedly compares the prince to his own son, Got. Throughout the dinner, Yuri stares at Got with a murderous look. This intense glare makes Got deeply uncomfortable. It also alerts Yuri's second brother, who quietly gets his attention. He asks if something happened between Yuri and the boy. The protagonist bluntly whispers that Got is a damn traitor. Even though his brother has no idea what he means by that, he smirks. He simply tells Yuri to put the boy in his place. Yuri knows there's still time to stop Got from dragging the kingdom to ruin. He remembers fighting and badly humiliating Got in the other timeline. He starts to wonder if that humiliation was the origin of the grudge. Was that the moment that led Got to betray them all? So, he decides on a similar path, but with a twist. He challenges Got to a fight. He wants to show Got exactly what he can do. Unsure about fighting a prince, Got initially refuses the challenge. Yuri doesn't give him time to think and attacks with everything he has, forcing Got to block. He even fights dirty, kicking sand into Got's face. Got protests that he should respect a knight's code, but Yuri just ignores him. Instead, Yuri lets go of his sword and rushes in to take advantage of the surprise. He lands a hard kick to Got's chest, sending him flying to the ground. Yuri stands over him, holding the training sword to his throat. He remembers that this is the same man who sold his father's honor to the Empire for information. He knows that trusting this boy is far too dangerous. Knowing Got's attack came from pure desperation, Yuri dismisses the threat and instead offers his hand. With it comes a promise to help him avoid that dark and lonely path. After Got leaves, Yuri's brother finally approaches, praising him for a fight well fought. He even admits he expected Yuri to lose, having only seen him as a spoiled brat obsessed with gambling. Yuri doesn't deny it, but declares that his plans to change should be a sign for his brother to improve too. Later that night, Yuri pushes himself to the limit training with his master. The brutal session leaves him completely exhausted, which is when his master decides it's time he learned a proper mana control method. The only problem is, Yuri already mastered the Boreal family method in his past life. In fact, he nearly reached its absolute limit, which is why this time, he wants something different. He's already thinking of a powerful technique he couldn't have dreamed of attempting back then, but his master is simply confused by this sudden, strange request for an alternative method. So, Yuri asks for something else, the name of a royal guard with raw, untapped potential. His teacher thoughtfully recommends a prodigy by the name of Jared. That name instantly triggers a memory of a man Yuri met near the very end of his past life. And the Jared he remembers is a far cry from any prodigy. Back then, the man was pathetic and unremarkable. Yuri is still amazed he survived as long as he did, and yet, he often heard that same man complaining that he hadn't trained hard enough when he was young. This man was filled with regret for not using the very talent everyone said he possessed. That memory solidifies a new plan as Yuri recalls the end of his previous life. With his mind made up, Yuri prepares to meet the man who may just become his next knight. This time, he will personally push Jared to become the legend he was always meant to be. He arrives at the Knight Academy and immediately asks for Jared by name. It turns out his teacher wasn't exaggerating. Jared is widely known as the most gifted of the new generation. But Yuri knows his lazy attitude will eventually turn that gift into a dull, wasted blade. To stop that from happening, Yuri asks the training officer for permission to join the sparring. And without a moment's hesitation, he singles out Jared as his opponent. Even though Jared towers over him by 3 heads, Yuri steps right into his personal space. He tells the prodigy he's heard a lot about him, and now he wants to see what kind of knight Jared really is. Jared, for his part, has no idea what's happening and couldn't care less about this fight. But with the entire class watching, he has no choice but to accept the challenge. The very moment the match begins, Yuri throws himself at his opponent. His attack is a blur of surprising intensity, but the truly amazing one here is Jared, who blocks every blow without even moving from his spot. He keeps up with Yuri's furious assault effortlessly. With such sharp, exact movements, it looks like victory is already his. Or at least that's how it seems at first. Because slowly but surely, Yuri starts reading the distance between them. He puts more and more pressure on Jared, perfectly matching his rhythm. Soon they're so evenly matched that Yuri suggests they make things a little more interesting. Then, to Jared's complete shock, the boy perfectly blocks his next attack. That single, impossible block proves Yuri's reflexes are nothing short of monstrous. It's the final straw. Jared realizes he can't keep taking it easy and finally gets serious. This sudden shift in pressure is all Yuri needs to know. He has no real chance of winning this fight. But he never planned to win. He just wanted to push Jared hard enough to awaken his slumbering drive. And to do that, he has to give everything he has just to land a single clean hit. After a fierce, desperate exchange, he actually manages to do it. Yuri can't help but celebrate his small, hard-won victory. Everyone watching is completely stunned by how well such a small kid can fight. They immediately turn to Jared, demanding to know if he was holding back. And even though Jared is still the one controlling the fight, for some reason, he feels utterly cornered. The simple idea of trading blows evenly with this little runt is infuriating. In fact, his frustration grows so immense that a bright blue energy suddenly erupts from his sword. Within moments, that same power flows and crackles around his entire body. The onlookers panic, because there's only one thing that blue aura could possibly mean. His eyes glowing with raw power, Jared charges straight at Yuri. Yuri barely, and I mean barely, throws himself out of the way of the strike. But the force of the slash is still so great, it shears clean through several locks of his hair. That last attack almost took Yuri's head clean off. The realization sends Jared into a panic, and he immediately begs for forgiveness for nearly killing a prince. But instead of anger, Yuri just brushes it off, telling him not to worry. In fact, he actually asks Jared to attack him again, because for the first time, things are finally getting interesting. And with that, Yuri rushes in again, this time with even more intensity. As Jared parries, he notices something different in the brat's eyes. This kid isn't just sparring, he's a maniac giving 100% in every single move. He's dead set on pushing Jared to his absolute limit. And yet, even knowing he's being manipulated, Yuri's plan works perfectly. Against his better judgment, Jared can't stop himself from rising to the challenge. An old, forgotten urge awakens to go farther than he ever thought possible. With that, his lazy stance vanishes, replaced by a deadly seriousness. His blood boils hotter than it ever has, even against opponents far stronger than this prince. As he attacks again, Yuri's response is so perfect that Jared has to admit this is the best fight of his life. For the very first time, he truly, desperately wants to win. A final, desperate strike from Jared shatters Yuri's sword, officially ending the battle. But instead of gloating, the protagonist immediately holds out his hand. He tells a stunned Jared that he learned something important today. That deep inside, Jared possesses a hidden strength unlike anyone else. Jared feels it too, admitting this brat has the spirit of a true warrior, not some pampered prince. But just as they're bonding, Yuri shocks him, saying he'll have to answer for injuring royalty. Panicked all over again, the poor guy runs off to get a first aid kit. But the other trainees weren't the only ones who saw that incredible fight. They soon realized the entire duel was witnessed by Zenit, the captain of the Briel Royal Guard. From a balcony high above, he had watched the entire exchange unfold. And even now, the captain is still processing the 2 hidden gems he just discovered. A few days later, Yuri stops Jared in the middle of the barracks hallway. He tells Jared to come with him, explaining they have to go somewhere very specific. Jared tries to refuse, insisting he needs to train, but the prince won't take no for an answer. After all, Yuri reminds him, this newfound discipline is all thanks to their little spar. In short, Jared owes him for saving him from a life of mediocrity. It turns out they won't be going alone, but with one more person. That's when Yuri calls out to Hernando, a rookie court mage. Though they're strangers now, in the original timeline, Hernando was one of Yuri's closest friends. Unimpressed, Hernando tries to brush him off, insisting he has better things to do. So, the protagonist resorts to a bribe only a prince could make. He offers to pay off the entirety of Hernando's crippling casino debt. Hernando is skeptical, asking why he should trust the word of a known gambling-addicted psychopath. But Yuri just tells him to take his word for it. That's not good enough for Hernando, who demands something more concrete. A prince's promise, he makes clear, isn't worth the air it's spoken on. Anticipating this, Yuri produces a formal contract and asks Jared to serve as the witness. Cornered, Hernando finally accepts, but with one final condition. Yuri has to be completely honest about where they're actually going. And on top of that, he must explain why he needs both a knight and a mage for this little trip. With no other choice, Yuri finally admits their destination, Sword Mountain. Their mission? To help him raid the lost dungeon of his own ancestor. To get there, they travel through a secret network of tunnels hidden right beneath the palace. This path, Yuri explains, leads straight to the mountain's entrance, the very place tied to the powerful legend of the first Brielle. Of course, what the others don't know is that in his past life, Yuri saw with his own eyes that the legend was real. Back then, after the Empire invaded Brielle, the enemy discovered that secret for themselves. They learned there really was a massive dungeon inside Sword Mountain, filled with the hidden treasures of the first Brielle Patriarch. Worse, the invaders also found these very same secret passages. And thanks to that discovery, they claimed the Brielle legacy right out from under its true heirs. But in this life, Yuri will do whatever it takes to seize that legacy first. Their journey through the tunnels continues until they finally reach a door at the foot of the mountain. Yuri produces a key he's always possessed, one whose purpose he only learned after the Empire's invasion in his past life. Naturally, Hernando has a million questions about how a pampered prince could possibly know all this. But Yuri just brushes him off, telling him to be quiet and watch his step. Because as he warns them, the plants all around this entrance are highly poisonous, and one wrong move will lead to a world of suffering. While his companions joke around on the path, they can't help but wonder what's gotten into their leader. Hernando and Jared are laughing, completely unaware of the imminent danger just ahead. That's when Yuri suddenly shouts for them to stop, warning of a nearby pack of direwolves. But Hernando accidentally steps on a twig, and the sharp snap is all it takes for a wolf to leap. Impressively, he instinctively channels mana, taking the creature down in a single, powerful blow. Yuri praises him for realizing its fur was too tough for a normal hit, but immediately points out his huge mistake. Because now, they've alerted not only the pack, but its alpha, which immediately orders the attack. Within seconds, the entire group finds itself completely surrounded. Seeing the odds, Jared decides he has to take charge of this fight, and with his mana-infused sword, he starts dropping them one by one. Yet they're still overwhelmed, so Yuri orders the mage to join in and show everyone why his father trusts him so much. An order Hernando gladly accepts, releasing dozens of skillfully controlled fireballs. The powerful magic incinerates the attacking wolves, turning them to ash. But just when they think it's over, even more monsters appear to block their path. Even so, the team works in perfect sync, taking down every last one of them. Utterly exhausted from the fight, they finally reach the summit of the Sword Mountain, only to find that the summit is completely empty. Without a moment's hesitation, Yuri starts searching the barren ground. His eyes scan the area carefully, desperate for any kind of clue. And then he spots it, a tiny glowing red point sticking out of the dirt. After digging for just a moment, he uncovers the hilt of a massive sword. Carved into its blade is a single word, guilty. Jared can only ask if this is the founder's great relic. Yuri admits he isn't sure, but adds that there's one way to find out. And right then, the ground beneath them collapses, plunging the entire party into a deep pit. They're falling into the entrance of the secret dungeon of the Brio family. As they hit the ground, Yuri realizes Jared protected him, softening their landing with a thick layer of mana. Fernando, meanwhile, simply floats down safely using his air magic. They've landed in a long hallway that appears to be completely empty, but the silence is broken as something emerges from the darkness ahead. A night spirit fully materializes, cloaked in a dense, dark mist. Yuri instantly recognizes it as a Knight of Death, a sign of the most serious danger. That's why he immediately orders Jared, who's still on the ground, to get up. Jared hasn't even recovered from the fall, but a couple of well-placed kicks get him on his feet. And despite his grumbling, Jared readies his sword. He takes his place in front of Yuri, prepared to shield him from the threat. The problem is, Knights of Death are ancient warriors, returned from the grave, and somehow, they possess even greater power now than they did in life. Yet this one should be harmless. Its true purpose is to guard this dungeon for the Emperor. Which means, Yuri deduces, it shouldn't be hostile to someone of his own royal blood. To test that theory, he confidently steps forward to face it directly. In response to his presence, the knight draws its massive sword. The blade scrapes free from its sheath with a chilling sound. But this is no attack. It's a sign of respect as the knight drives the blade into the ground before him, a gesture which nearly gives Fernando a heart attack. Then things get even stranger when the knight speaks, remarking that Yuri's arrogant attitude is just like someone named Eric Braille. Both Fernando and Jared recognize that name instantly. Eric Braille, the legendary swordsman who conquered the entire continent with just one sword. He was the founder of the very kingdom they now call home. This confirms it. The knight is an ancient and impossibly powerful being. The knight then explains that only a true descendant of the Braille family can draw that sword from the ground. It's the very same one the founder himself wielded in his time. With that, the knight turns its full, unnerving attention to the young descendant before it. Yuri meets its gaze without a hint of fear. The ancient guardian then poses a single question: what does he have to say for himself? Yuri's answer is simple. The founder's legacy is his by right of inheritance. After his bold declaration, the entire dungeon falls into a deep, profound silence. Finally, the knight breaks the silence with two words: follow me. To guide the air. This was the very reason the knight was placed here. But as Yuri and the knight walk off into the darkness, Jared can only watch them go. He can't shake the feeling that something about this entire situation is deeply wrong. And in the back of his mind, a truly unsettling suspicion takes root. Yuri tells him to stop wasting time and come along. His words mix with flashes from the other timeline. Of course, Jared doesn't understand what's happening. He assumes Yuri is just stressed as they arrive at a group of crystals. The knight guarding the area simply tells them he hopes they are worthy. Suddenly, the crystals light up. They are instantly transported away. Yuri finds himself in what looks like a vast desert. When he looks around for the others, he realizes he's completely alone. His only company is a faceless, human-shaped puppet. Without warning, the puppet rushes at him, ready to fight. It's being controlled by a mana technique, and the figure activates the mana inside its own body. It channels that energy into its sword, as if showing Yuri how mana control really works. The figure then tells him to copy its movements, acting like a brutal mentor while beating him down. Yuri knows this is insane. A kid his age shouldn't even know how to copy a technique this advanced. But Yuri is definitely not an average kid. For the first time in this new life, he activates his mana technique. His mana doesn't shine as brightly as the figure's, and it's nowhere near as powerful. But it finally excites his opponent. The puppet notices his resolve and gets ready to strike. He is determined not to make the same mistakes he did in his past life. As he battles the figure, he realizes it's demonstrating the founder's own techniques. He plans to learn every single move while he still has the chance. Meanwhile, Jared wakes up in a room identical to the kingdom's training grounds. He wonders if he's dreaming until he senses something nearby. A voice tells him to attack. He comes face to face with a perfect copy of himself. He's now sure that beating himself is the trial of the Knight of Death. The strange thing is that unlike Yuri's opponent, this other Jared can speak. It tells him to stop fighting his fate. The clone reminds him that he became a royal guard because he wanted an easy life. It tells him to stay away from the prince if he doesn't want a life filled with hardship. The words hit him hard. For a moment, Jared thinks the old him would have agreed completely and gone back to the palace. But remembering his recent fight with Yuri changes his mind. He now knows there's more to life than just comfort. He wants the thrill of achieving something. He tells the copy that it's out of date. He won't hesitate anymore. A sword that's already been swung can't be stopped by empty words. The clone instantly activates its aura. It attacks with a blow that is powerful, but very simple. Jared blocks it with no trouble at all. He realizes his opponent fights exactly like his old self, lazy and using only basic strategies. It's a fighting style that avoids even the smallest risk. It's a totally dull style, and he now looks down on it. He lands several clean hits until he finally knocks the clone down. Jared calls his old self painfully boring. But then, out of nowhere, the clone starts melting. It transforms into a giant clay golem. This is its true form, the same kind Yuri must be facing right now. Before attacking, Jared prays that the prince can overcome his own trial as well. He gets ready to face the golem. The desert where Yuri is fighting has completely changed. What was once endless sand is now a wasteland filled with broken swords. Worst of all, Yuri's battered body is just another piece of the wreckage. He can't even move as the figure comes closer, ready to finish him. The puppet strikes, leaving only an explosion and trails of mana behind. But the result of the attack is nothing like anyone expected, because in the final instant before the hit landed, Yuri grabbed his sword. Properly activating the mana method he was just taught, he lands his first direct hit of the entire fight. As Yuri watches, the spectral figure's sword begins to crumble. Then, the figure itself slowly starts to fade into the air. Its weapon shatters completely, scattering into pieces on the ground. And as it dissipates, the figure offers a simple final goodbye. For Yuri, this can only mean one thing: his time here is up. So he uses this last moment to thank the bean for everything it taught him. Afterward, Yuri, Jared, and Hernando are returned to the main cave. And there, the Knight of Death is already waiting for them. The Knight explains that what Yuri just experienced was the Founder's inheritance. A piece of the Founder's very consciousness, left behind for the first Briel heir to reach that sacred place. This makes Yuri recall his past life, when the Empire completely destroyed this mountain, meaning no one could have ever completed the trial. But what's truly astonishing is that the mana method he learned wasn't a technique the Founder used in his prime. No, it was a technique he developed in his final days, the culmination of a lifetime of knowledge. This means Yuri now possesses a technique that nobody else in the world knows. Since the dungeon only opens at the right time, all the Knight can reveal for now is its name, the Soul Separation Technique. However, that's not all the inheritance holds, as the Knight of Death commands him to kneel. To receive the Founder's full legacy, Yuri must first swear an oath to never fear his enemies. Suddenly, the Knight grabs Yuri by the hair, forcing him to meet his piercing gaze. "Remember this well," he snarls. A Briel never abandons home, not even in death. They return to the palace after that, and just a few days later, Yuri is woken by a sudden commotion. A frantic Emma bursts right into his room. She cries out that the time has finally come. Yet she still finds a moment to scold him for staying up so late the night before. Yuri simply explains that he had something important he needed to find. He doesn't tell her, of course, that he was deep in the royal family's old records. He had searched until he discovered a small note, one stating the Founder was not an only child. The Founder had a brother, a man who left home and vanished from history without ever being named. And Yuri now knows that nameless brother was the very Death Knight who showed him the truth. The real owner of the sword, who gave up all glory to serve his brother and the kingdom, even beyond death. Emma's voice pulls him back to the present, reminding him that her father is calling for him. She doesn't know why, only that the order came right after the king's meeting with Hernando. At once, Yuri realizes the mage must have told his father everything that happened that night. But this time, he has a brand new sword to back up his words. In the throne room, his father says little at first, a silent, imposing figure on the throne, so Yuri waits patiently for the king to finally speak. At last, the king rises and slowly walks towards his son. He points out that Yuri's entire attitude has been different for a long time now, and he demands to know what, exactly, changed him. For a long moment, Yuri hesitates. In the end, he decides to admit at least part of the truth. He speaks of a dream, a vision where he lived through a terrible crime he committed, one that made everything fall apart. His father immediately asks what crime he means, failing to protect Briel to the very end. In this dream, he explains, the kingdom was trapped in a great war and countless people were massacred. And even though he tried to protect them with everything he had, he failed again and again. The kingdom fell, and in that moment, he made the most cowardly choice of all. He died. But what's most important is that after waking from that terrible dream, the necklace his mother gave him was gone. He feels with all his heart that the dream was a warning from her way of giving him a second chance. His father, however, immediately wants more details about who started this war. Yet Yuri knows it's far too soon to mention the Empire. So he claims it was done by an unknown army that he couldn't identify. It's a vague answer that only leaves more questions in its wake. and the king's intense stare makes one thing terrifyingly clear: he is not satisfied with his son's story. While his father is simply glad that Yuri's change appears to be for the better, Yuri himself is only focused on one thing: a desperate need to make up for his past sins. That's when his father reveals there's something else they need to discuss. It's time, he declares, for Yuri to draw his sword. Although Yuri knows his father is still in his prime as a swordsman, he's still shocked to be the first son ever invited into the king's private training hall. All the prince can do is stare in disbelief. Here, Fiore admits he always believed none of his children had inherited his gift with the sword. Yuri immediately tries to argue back, insisting he does have talent. And that's all it takes for his father to challenge him to a duel. But first, Fiore asks him what talent truly means. Is it just a matter of strength, speed, or reflexes? Do those qualities alone make someone a master swordsman? Or, he prods, is there something more? For a moment, Yuri thinks of his past self, who possessed all those traits in abundance. But before he can even form an answer, his father cuts him off with a firm, "Numbert." There is something far more important, Fiore explains, a factor that allows one to push past their natural limits. To prove his point, Fiore suddenly activates his mana method. In less than a heartbeat, the very air in the room shifts. This immense pressure forces Yuri's body into pure survival mode. Just as quickly, his father lowers the sword and the pressure vanishes, explaining that this is the call of the sword, a sign of one's true path. With a piercing gaze, his father asks if Yuri truly believes he's meant to wield a sword. Would he, even at the moment of his own death, cling to his beliefs and his will to fight? It's a question Yuri still doesn't have an answer for. Then, suddenly, the world goes dark and his father's very form begins to change, shifting into a terrifying mass of dozens of red eyes, all staring down at Yuri in contempt. In an instant, darkness envelops him, filled with the screams of everyone who died protecting him in his past life. It's as if he's been dragged right back to that final, hopeless battle, surrounded by advancing enemy soldiers. He recognizes the feint immediately. He's finished. On instinct, he defends himself, fighting exactly as he did in his past life. And once again, he hears the desperate voices of his men shouting for him to run. They promise to hold the line, to buy him time. And just like before, his men save his life only to die horribly right in front of him. Despair washes over him as he wonders if Brio was always destined to fall, no matter what he does. But this time, something is different. Unlike the original timeline, he now wields the Death Knight's sword. His hand tightens around the blade marked guilty. He remembers the vow he made. A promise to never again fear his enemies, no matter the odds. And one by one, the Death Knight's words echo in his mind, urging him to act according to his beliefs, reminding him to fulfill his duty. So this time, instead of running, Yuri stays and fights alongside his men. With every strike, he cuts down another enemy, uncaring that his chances of victory are almost zero. Soon, he's surrounded again, just like before. Yet instead of despair, his mind races with what could still go right. That's when he unleashes his aura, a defiant sign that the people of Brio never abandon their strength, not even in the face of certain death. With his faith unshaken, he charges forward, ready to fight to his very last breath. And then, the vision shatters, replaced by the cold ceiling of his father's training hall. He sees his father, looking worried, asking if he can hear him as Yuri's eyes glow a bright, fiery red. Yuri finally snaps back to reality, utterly confused. Just moments ago, he was surrounded by the Black Army. Calmly, his father explains that everything he just experienced was merely an illusion. And yet he can't hide the immense pride in his son's newfound resolve. Because what Fiore witnessed in that illusion proved that his son's fate points to only one thing: wielding the sword. Yuri's smile isn't just for his father's approval. It's the joy of knowing that by living through that war again, this isn't about fate. He has already chosen to forge a better future for himself. And yet, he can still see the deep worry lingering in his father's eyes. The king looks at him as if he might die at any second. So to lighten the mood, Yuri jokes a little, telling his father to leave everything in his hands. After all, he's a genius. Later, when Yuri shows up for daily training, he's sporting a massive lump on his head. This immediately earns him mockery from his teacher, who warns that even that won't save him from what's planned. While Yuri already knows this, seeing the man again brings a different question to mind. Just why did his teacher stay in Braille all these years, instead of returning to his homeland? The answer, it turns out, is simple. He accepted a condition that would one day grant him the right to duel Yuri's father. Since that means he'll eventually leave, Yuri asks if he might consider staying if he asked him to. But the teacher says no. The only thing that can make him remain is being shown something truly interesting. And what he wants to see, specifically, is the founder's famous lost sword technique. So the teacher does know what happened during the expedition a few days ago. While Yuri can understand his obsession with swords, he has to refuse, telling him he cannot teach the technique. But the man insists. It doesn't matter if Yuri hasn't mastered it yet, he just wants a single look. Even if he shows it to him though, it won't actually help. That's because the founder's technique is directly tied to the mana method itself. This is strange, since methods usually just strengthen sword techniques, not become an inseparable part of them. Yuri even admits he still doesn't fully understand how it all works. He knows that if he shows it to his teacher now, the man will only receive a fragment of the information, never the complete technique. Yet the teacher is so intensely curious that he's willing to stay in Brielle as long as Yuri desires. He just wants to see it. After teasing him just a little more, Yuri finally agrees and tells him to stay in Brielle. He then activates his mana method with Soul Cut, preparing to strike. But just as he's about to move, his teacher suddenly admits something. It turns out he always planned on staying in Brielle for at least another 10 years anyway. With that little deception now settled, the teacher gets ready to fight. Furious at being played, the protagonist channels that anger into his attack, turning it into one of his best training sessions yet. Later that evening, Yuri returns to the solitude of his room. He takes a moment to process just how much the future is beginning to change. He no longer believes that vision was a simple memory from the past or some random illusion. No, it was a glimpse of the future now being actively shaped by the small choices he's made. And even if these changes aren't enough to stop the war with the Empire, every small step is building towards something bigger. The worst part, though, is knowing it all depends on him and the choices he alone must make. He has to find something else. A definitive way to stop the Empire once and for all. Suddenly, Emma appears right beside him. She scolds him for wasting time when he has a crucial meeting tomorrow. A meeting with none other than the kingdom's Senate. Surprisingly, it was his own father who suggested the meeting. On top of that, for the first time in a long while, every single senator will be in attendance. Because of this, Emma makes him promise to behave himself. He absolutely must not pick a fight with anyone. The next day, at that very meeting, the main issue becomes terrifyingly clear. The entire debate is centered on the founder's sword technique. And Yuri is standing right at the eye of the storm. Several dukes insist they cannot allow the prince to use a mana method that hasn't been properly approved. They even begin pounding the table in protest. What should have been a serious discussion quickly spirals into a complete circus. This isn't about safety, it's a blatant power struggle where the real goal is to challenge the king. And in that moment, Yuri finally understands why his father never bothered attending these pathetic meetings. While some dukes argue that if the method was truly left by the founder, it shouldn't need testing, one of them raises the real question, hiding his challenge behind a mask of fake concern. Does the technique truly belong to the founder at all, or did the prince just make the entire thing up? Finally losing his patience, Yuri points out the sheer absurdity of holding a meeting about his mana method when most of them are traitors waiting to join the Empire. But of course his own guard immediately cuts in, insisting it's too early for a final judgment. After all, he explains, mana methods can cause vastly different side effects from person to person. The dukes immediately twist this argument, using it as proof that the method isn't safe. On that basis, they claim Yuri should be banned from using it entirely. The problem with their demand, however, is that a person can only change their mana method if very little time has passed since they learned the first one. Yet after his battle with the founder, Yuri can feel Soul Cut has already taken firm root in his core. Because of this, trying to switch methods now would be incredibly risky. It's an attempt that could completely backfire and destroy him. As he struggles to find the words to explain his predicament, just then, one of the men who'd remained silent, Baron Hernando, finally speaks up. He poses a single, simple question to the entire room. How many of them, he asks, have actually fought in a real battle? Instantly, the room falls into a deep, murmuring silence. It's the Duke leading the attack on Yuri who breaks the quiet, demanding to know who the hell this man is. More importantly, he scoffs. What title does this nobody even hold? That's when Hernando rises, introducing himself simply as a free baron. This title sets off a wave of laughter, since someone of such a low rank has no right to speak here. But the laughter dies the moment Hernando reveals he was invited personally by Count Sidor. That name alone shuts them up fast, because Sidor is the lord who leads the territory guarding Brielle's borders. Now the nobles are stunned. Sidor has never even bothered to send a representative to these meetings before. So what, they demand, has changed? Hernando declares this entire conversation is stupid because on a real battlefield, the type of mana method doesn't matter one bit. If they were true warriors, they would already know this. Seizing the opening, Yuri declares that no one here has the right to question the founder's own mana method. Regardless of their opinions, he has already made his choice. And Hernando immediately backs him up, arguing they should follow the founder's will since there's nothing dangerous about it. If anything, trying to force a change is the real insult here. With a hint of sarcasm, Hernando apologizes, remarking that a life spent fighting orcs on the frontier tends to ruin one's manners. After all, orcs don't really care what mana method you're using when you're cutting their heads off. This finally makes the Duke snap, telling Hernando to crawl back to the border. That whole territory, they sneer, does nothing but drain the kingdom's resources. It's a low blow, meant to hurt, because that border is a brutal land where soldiers die every single day. Hernando himself has had to identify the bodies of lifelong friends after countless massacres. So no, they are not wasting resources for fun. They need every last resource because the orcs, they never rest. And they are the only ones holding that line to protect this kingdom. Hearing this triggers a memory for Yuri, a huge massacre from his past life that happened right around this time. It was a disaster caused by the conflict between Brielle and the Klein army, a conflict the orcs used as a perfect opportunity to attack. So Yuri asks how things had been on the border lately, and Hernando's answer is chilling, more tense than ever. As Hernando explains that entire towns have already been destroyed, a cold realization washes over Yuri. The timing of all these events, it perfectly matches what he remembers from his past life. He realizes now that it's all connected. The intensity of his reaction immediately catches everyone's attention. Realizing he's drawn their focus, Yuri stands, deciding to leave. He tells them all that instead of wasting time on useless talk, there are far more important problems to deal with. But his sudden shift in attitude does not go unnoticed by Hernando. That very night, the Baron contacts Count Sidor, relaying everything that happened in the meeting. He includes the rumors about Yuri's complete change in personality, and even mentions the new, determined look in his eyes. Ultimately, the Count agrees that this new Yuri is worth looking into, and orders Hernando to find out everything he can, an order Hernando readily accepts. For a moment, he looks out over the peaceful capital from his window, but then, down below, something catches his eye. It's Yuri moving stealthily through the streets, his face hidden by a hood. And the young noble has the unmistakable look of someone on his way to do something very, very important. Just as planned, Yuri slips out of the palace completely undetected. With him is Hernando, who is not only paranoid about being caught, but has no idea where they're even going. In his panic, he keeps reminding Yuri that he's not allowed to be out this late without permission. That's when Yuri reveals their destination, the biggest illegal casino in the capital. And since Hernando knows the way, his job is to be the guide. At first, Hernando refuses, desperately trying to fight the inner gambler that wants to bet everything he has, but Yuri offers him the perfect excuse. He tells Hernando that this must be done, not for fun, but for the good of Brielle. With that one sentence, Hernando's attitude completely changes, and he happily leads the way. You see, in his past life, Yuri knows 3 key figures caused the chaos that led to Brielle's fall. First was the leader of the underworld, and second was a business tycoon who ran the continent's most successful merchant guild. The last was a notorious assassin who ultimately beheaded that underworld boss and took his place. It was her arrival that started an age of terror in Brielle's streets. These 3 are the first chess pieces he needs to move, a game that starts with a visit to this very casino. There, they are welcomed by Cory, a professional loan shark and the current leader of the underworld. Cory greets them so politely that Yuri instantly realizes the man already knows exactly who he is. And the underworld boss confirms this, saying he couldn't let a royal visit go without a personal greeting. Since the cards are on the table, Yuri makes it clear he didn't just come to play a few games. Cory understands immediately. He invites them to sit down so they can have a proper conversation. The only one unhappy is Hernando, who really did just want to gamble, but Yuri quickly shuts him down. The prince then reveals he came to ask for a loan, a vital part of an investment he's planning. Cory naturally questions this choice, since he could have just gone to a bank. Yuri, however, refuses to say why he needs the money from him specifically. He only reveals that he plans to buy up all the Magranja, a species from the Klein region. He simply insists that it will soon become far more valuable. Hernando immediately calls the plan insane. Even Cory points out that Magranja is mostly just used in luxury perfumes. And yet, Yuri simply insists he knows exactly what he's doing. Instead of arguing, Yuri then asks how much Cory is willing to lend him. He specifies that he's asking not as the prince, but as him Broly's. After thinking it over for just a moment, Cory simply slides a promissory note across the table. He tells Yuri to sign it. As for Hernando, the poor guy is just fuming that Yuri dragged him all the way here. Before he can play a single game, Yuri drags him out, announcing they're heading to the Merchant Guild next. What Yuri hasn't told them is that the profit is basically guaranteed, because Maranja is a rare item made by a single alchemist connected to Duke Klein. That same alchemist will be one of the first to die when the Civil War starts. Which means if Yuri buys up the supply now, he can raise the price as high as he wants later. Right now, however, the Merchant Guild is nothing but a ruined house. But Yuri knows exactly what its leader is capable of becoming. His next chess piece is Ain, who opens the door with no idea who is standing there. Wasting no time, Yuri introduces himself as the Prince of Abriel. He then says he came to entrust her with something very important. What Hernando doesn't know is that this business slump won't last long for her. Before long, Ain will be a famous name known across the entire continent. She's not just a gifted merchant, but someone who keeps her promises, unlike Goryo, who would betray anyone in a second. Yuri's real goal, then, is to help her become even greater in this new timeline. Just as Hernando asks if he's finally done with his crazy errands, Yuri lets out a grin. He says there is still one more stop, the most important one of all. So he leads Hernando through the dark alleys of the city to find his third and final ally. They end up in the heart of the slums. It's a place where rats are everywhere, a place where people fight to the death over a single piece of bread. In the middle of this mess, he finds a blue-haired girl who seems completely harmless. But Yuri knows her true identity. He knows that before long, she will be the one who kills Goryo. She will be the one to climb to the very top of the assassin order, and her name will be feared by all as the new leader of Asana. Asana can't believe her eyes. A prince is standing in a place like this. But Yuri quickly reassures her, explaining he's only come to help. That's when his eyes fall on the small girl behind her who looks terribly ill. And in a flash, Yuri remembers from his past life, this is where it all began. This is the very moment Asana was forced to beg Goryo for a loan just to get the child life-saving treatment. But like everyone who dealt with Goryo, she was soon crushed by the interest, unable to pay it back. This downward spiral is what ultimately forced her to become an assassin under his command. Breaking the cycle, Yuri hands her a pouch of money, telling her to treat the little girl with no strings attached. His only request? That she simply remember the name MC Brio. Later, on the way back to the palace, Hernando can't help but ask why he'd just give so much money to a beggar. For Yuri, however, this was just another piece of a much larger plan falling into place. In fact, he only needs one more piece to complete the puzzle. So he turns to his companion and asks what vision he saw in the founder's tomb. After a moment of telling silence, Hernando finally answers. In his vision, he saw himself gambling, of all things, in one of the Empire's biggest casinos. Hearing this, Yuri simply asks him to keep what he saw a complete secret. The very next day, a summons arrives from Yuri's father, the king. Once in the throne room, he demands to know exactly what they were doing last night. Without missing a beat, Hernando honestly admits that he dragged Yuri to the biggest casino in the kingdom. The king is left completely stunned. But the real surprise is how Hernando completely covers for the prince, insisting all they did was gamble away their money. Afterwards, he claims, they just walked around the city. Yuri, he explains, wanted to see how ordinary people live. No matter how hard the king presses, Hernando sticks to his story, insisting they return to the palace without any trouble. And yet, the king is left with the unshakable feeling that they're hiding something. To which Hernando, with a cheerful smile, agrees that they absolutely are. A few days pass, and during training, Yuri's teacher notes the palace ladies hanging around, insisting the prince must attend the next ball. But Yuri couldn't care less about a ball, he's more focused on the founder's technique, which his teacher confirms has no fixed form. That, the teacher explains, is exactly what he's been trying to tell him. It's less a set of moves and more of a pure feeling. In his head, Yuri feels a pang of guilt, wishing he could explain his own understanding of it any better. It's almost as if his teacher can read his mind. He tells Yuri not to worry, pointing out that he's pushing himself far too hard. After all, he's already accomplished more than any boy his age and is still growing. Yuri just shrugs off the praise and suggests they train again. And this time, to make things interesting, he proposes they use real swords. Without a moment's hesitation, his teacher agrees and takes his stance. Seizing the opportunity, Yuri makes a bet. If he wins, his teacher has to go to the ball. But his teacher just cuts him off, declaring the bet pointless since there's no way he could possibly lose. That condescending dismissal is all the motivation Yuri needs. He charges forward, intent on making the old man eat those words. Meanwhile, several days later, a procession of carriages passes through the city gates. Inside one of them is Jorge, the second prince of the empire. And traveling with him is a familiar face, the ever-ambitious Trina. She can't contain her excitement, exclaiming there's someone she has wanted to see for a very long time. That someone can only be Yuri, who is currently standing like a doll while Emma gets him ready for the big ball. Of course, he complains the entire time about how ridiculously flashy the outfit is. Yet once he's ready, he turns, offering Emma his hand and asking her to practice dancing with him. But what could have been a sweet moment is immediately interrupted by Emma's suspicious glare. She is clearly, and perhaps rightfully, worried that he's about to step all over her feet. With a smirk, Yuri admits he can't promise anything as he takes her hand. Then he firmly pulls her into position, telling her not to worry. The sudden, unexpected closeness sends a deep blush spreading across Emma's face. Flustered, she boasts that she's a very skilled dancer with lots of experience, though she's never had a partner who was quite this short. A grand ball is underway at the palace, a glittering affair for the kingdom's elite. As musicians fill the hall with music, the most powerful figures in the kingdom gather. Overseeing it all from his throne is the king, watching the festivities with a sharp eye. Nearby, Yuri stands with his brothers, carefully observing the shifting political mood around them. To his surprise, even the reclusive Count Satyr is in attendance, a sign that something is brewing. But suddenly, a loud horn cuts through the ballroom's chatter, announcing an unexpected arrival. All eyes turn as the main doors swing open for a grand entrance. In walks Prince Jorge of the Empire, radiating an undeniable aura of authority. He bypasses everyone, striding directly toward King Sifiori to offer his formal greetings. After thanking the king for the invitation, the two exchange terse, formal pleasantries with a firm handshake. It's only then that Yuri realizes with a jolt that Jorge didn't come alone. Because right there with him, bowing with a stunning practiced grace, is Trina. The sight of her freezes Yuri where he stands, his mind instantly flooded with memories of their shared past. He remembers the close, intimate bond they once shared. But that warm image immediately shatters when he recalls her bitter betrayal. Even now, the cold words of her letter asking for forgiveness still sting like a fresh wound. Steeling his heart, he vows to himself that he will not make the same mistake twice. That's why Yuri keeps his eyes fixed on the floor, deliberately avoiding her gaze. Trina, however, continues to look right at him with a sickeningly fake expression of kindness. He feels her eyes on him constantly, a heavy weight that makes him question how he should act. After all, in this new timeline, she technically hasn't done anything wrong to him yet, and yet she still represents the terrible memories he can never ever forget. The internal conflict is maddening. Luckily, his personal maid Emma steps in, saving him from his spiraling thoughts. She offers him a cookie and jokes around, sensing his need for a distraction. Her simple, honest kindness works, lifting his spirits almost immediately. But his relief is short-lived. As a menacing shadow falls over him, Prince Jorge has approached. Yuri instantly recognizes the man tied to his most awful memories. This was the very commander who led the Empire's troops to bring his kingdom, Briol, to ruin. Forced to hide his hostility, Yuri greets him as politely as he can muster. In response, the blonde prince simply studies him with a careful, piercing stare. Yuri has no choice but to hold his ground, weathering the intense scrutiny. Then, out of nowhere, Jorge breaks into a chilling, predatory smile. He unleashes his mana technique, sending waves of sharp, hostile aura directly at Yuri. The immense pressure crashes down, threatening to freeze his entire body in place. Yet somehow, Yuri withstands the assault, a feat that clearly impresses the prince. Having finished his little test, Jorge simply turns and walks away without another word. Yuri realizes the encounter was both a test of his strength and a clear threat. This version of Jorge is no different from the monster he knew in his past life. Just then, a loud crash shatters the tense atmosphere of the ballroom. Yuri whips around to see Emma kneeling before Jorge, wine spilled all over the Empire's pristine cloak. She desperately tries to apologize, her face completely pale with terror. But Jorge only glances at the worry on Yuri's face and flashes a cruel, satisfied smile. Instead of accepting the apology, he draws his sword. He warns Emma that she has made a very, very serious mistake. A crime that, under crown law, is punishable by death. In that instant, Yuri knows this was no accident, but a deliberate and malicious setup. Jorge declares that she must pay the price, and that beheading her is the only way to restore his honor. He then throws Yuri the exact same smug, challenging look from their earlier confrontation. As Yuri looks ready to lunge forward, his father, the king, steps in first. King Fiore tells Jorge that if he wants blood, he can take it from his own people, not from theirs. At the king's direct command, Jorge immediately sheathes his sword, appearing to concede. He even apologizes, claiming the Empire and Briol have always enjoyed a good relationship. Fiore agrees, but adds a sharp warning. If this disrespect continues, his patience will run out. But this was the opening Jorge was waiting for, and he counters by bringing up the time Fiore himself executed one of the Empire's knights. He argues that since the Emperor let that insult pass, Briol should now execute the maid to make things even. The clever, twisted logic leaves King Fiore trapped with no good response. Yuri understands that to go against Jorge now is to declare war on the entire Empire. His mind races, filled with 100 different ways this situation could end in utter disaster. But in the end, only one thing matters now, the vow he made to himself when he returned to the past. He remembers a core tenet: the people of Briol do not throw away their honor for anyone. So, even if this decision makes everything 1,000 times worse, Yuri resolves to act. He steps forward, declaring that since Emma is his personal maid, her mistake is his responsibility to bear. Yuri steps forward, ready to take the punishment for the maid, Emma. He declares that he will accept it all in her place. He feels like this life is on borrowed time anyway, and he's not afraid to die doing what's right. Instead of an execution, Yuri asks Jorge to settle this with a trial by combat. The request shocks Jorge so much that he bursts out laughing. He accepts the challenge. He then turns to the king, asking if he agrees to settle it this way. King Fiore hesitates for a moment. Knowing he can't back down and shame Yuri, he agrees to the duel. Jorge then declares it wouldn't be a fair fight between them. Instead, he will choose the youngest man in his royal guard to represent him. Yuri then goes to Emma and helps her up from the floor. She's shaken by the terror she just went through. She starts crying, asking how he could risk so much for her so easily. He tells her not to worry, but then notices Trina is still staring at him. A foolish part of him wants to talk to her, but he turns and walks away instead. A little later, his brother Cedric stops him, asking what he was thinking. Yuri simply says he couldn't stand by and let them kill her. Cedric smiles, clearly proud of his little brother's conviction. He gives Yuri's head a reassuring pat. Cedric then gets serious, explaining that Jorge's deal wasn't as generous as it sounded. Because the fighter replacing Jorge is so close in age to Yuri, any accident that happens could easily be covered up. Luckily, Yuri already knows the risks involved. Even when Cedric offers to fight in his place, Yuri refuses. He declares that a prince must finish what he starts, leaving his brother prouder than ever. Yuri reflects that his brother is one of the kindest people he knows. Part of the reason he wants to save Briol is to see the kingdom it could become with someone like Cedric in charge. The next day, Yuri arrives for the duel. Jorge watches smugly from the front row. Hernando, however, is deeply moved, seeing his little boy in his first real fight. Zonnet adds that Yuri's opponent looks incredibly strong and steady with a sword, especially considering he isn't even a knight yet. Hernando just smiles, telling Zonnet to watch Yuri's movements closely. He promises that once the fight starts, Zonnet will see there is nothing to fear. Among the many ranks a mage can earn in the Magic Tower, Grand Sorcerer is one of the highest. It's a title reserved for those born with origin magic, like fate-revealing magic, which lets its user glimpse the world's destiny. And Hernando is the only one who has it. So weeks ago, when Hernando was beaten in a game for the very first time, and by none other than Yuri, he knew something strange was happening. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't read or predict Yuri's fate. Instead, he was hit with a strange vision of an adult version of the protagonist. He was fighting with an inhuman resolve that left Hernando completely stunned. It was the resolve of someone who fully controls his own destiny. From that moment on, Hernando watched Yuri carefully. He eventually concluded that Yuri has no fixed fate. That's why, with all this in mind, Hernando refuses to worry. Back in the present, Yuri tells his opponent to stop waving his sword around and just fight. He makes it crystal clear that he is ready. The other boy signals his readiness as well. And so, King Fiora officially begins the trial by combat. Not even a second passes before Yuri charges forward. His opponent is left frozen by his superhuman speed. Even more impressively, he uses his mana method without a hint of hesitation. His opponent barely holds on, needing time to adjust to Yuri's aggressive style. Little by little, the fight begins to even out. But then Yuri pulls back, proudly looking at the fresh cut on his opponent's face. The boy, however, stays on guard the entire time. Meanwhile, a tense Fiore turns to Hernando, asking what he thinks the result will be. Hernando, however, pauses to think a little longer. He turns just in time to see the other boy's strike finally land with a burst that draws blood from Yuri. Even so, Yuri answers back with the exact same force, which is why Hernando has to admit he truly doesn't know who will win. Instead of a direct answer, Hernando simply poses a question of his own. Without a moment of hesitation, Fiore declares that Yuri is not on the other boy's level. At least, not when it comes to pure, unadulterated strength. But Hernando only partly agrees with that assessment. His mind drifts back to why he came to this kingdom in the first place, the signs from the heavens. Those signs had shown him that the strongest people on the continent were here, including the one who could change the world's very fate. All this time, he thought that person was Fiore, and with the kingdom living in peace, he saw no further reason to stay. Yet now, with just one look at Yuri, he knows it's not time to leave. As if on cue, his opponent lunges forward to attack again. This time, however, Yuri doesn't react as before, he simply waits for him. He remains perfectly still for a moment before fully activating his mana method. And then, he unleashes the Founder's technique. It's time to end this fight. In a blur of superhuman speed, he rushes forward until his blade rests against the enemy's neck. The poor boy is absolutely certain he's about to die. In fact, everyone watching freezes completely, thinking the exact same thing. But then, Yuri stops. Stunned by this mercy, his opponent can do nothing but admit defeat. As the crowd erupts in cheers, Hernando stands, realizing he has finally met the person who defies the heavenly signs every single day. Now it's all starting to make sense. The person he was searching for was here all along. Yuri Briol, the one who rises beyond fate itself. Following that fateful duel, the story leaps forward 5 full years. We find a maid with glasses running frantically through the palace, completely lost. She's all turned around, with no idea where she's supposed to be. That's when she slams right into Jack, the second prince, who demands to know what she's doing there. From his age and rotten attitude, she instantly knows he's the infamous middle son. He's the very one known for his sinister eyes and unbearably arrogant behavior. So, remembering the advice from her superiors, she decides to ignore him. Sadly for her, this only makes the prince even angrier. He's about to lash out when a voice suddenly interrupts them. Luckily, it's Yuri who has come to her rescue. She recognizes him immediately, of course. He's well known and deeply respected among all the staff. With just a stern look, he scares his younger brother off in an instant. You see, Yuri has now reached the Sagkyon state, which lets him use mana to reduce strain on his sword hand, making him faster and more agile. He's 18 years old now, and it's been nearly half a decade since he first traveled back in time. That also means the prophesied war with the Empire is closer than ever. His peaceful days are numbered, a fact that becomes painfully clear the moment he reaches the royal meeting room. No one even hears him knock, they're all too busy panicking and yelling at each other inside. So he decides to get their attention by covering his fist with mana and blasting the door wide open. He finally walks in. And as crazy as that entrance was, nobody is the least bit surprised to see him. He joins the meeting, only to hear everyone insisting they have no troops available to send to the Allied forces. Their brilliant plan, therefore, is to simply ignore the Empire's request. Even though they're supposed to be allies, one noble insists that the other nations can just handle it. Listening to them bicker over weapons and soldiers, Yuri sees it as nothing but pure selfishness. This is the exact same thing that happened in his past life, when the Empire called on them to join an alliance against the Orcs. And back then, their refusal was the very thing that led to the Orcs crushing everything and pushing deep into every nation's borders. Worse still, the last time the Orcs attacked, they bypassed the Empire completely to strike the kingdom directly. It was a clear setup, forcing them to fight the Empire's battle. In that bloody conflict, they lost their best knights, including a man in this very room named Liam, and that is exactly the kind of tragedy Yuri refuses to let happen a second time. So as the nobles continue to squabble, he slams his hand on the table, silencing the entire room. That's when he declares that he will join the Allied forces, and that they must do their part as well. After all, nobles have a duty, and he refuses to let the name Briol be stained by inaction. His father watches on, a dangerous move, yes, but one he can't help but find interesting. Following the meeting, Yuri pushes himself through a grueling afternoon of training. But his practice is suddenly interrupted when Jack rushes in, demanding answers. Why is he joining the army? As royalty, he has no reason to take such an absurd risk. Yuri simply answers that being royalty is the very reason he must lead by example. As for Jack, he'll be staying safely behind to guard the palace, or doing anything that doesn't involve a high chance of death. Changing the subject, Yuri turns to his teacher and asks if he's worried about him. The old man just scoffs, doubting Yuri would die so easily. Instead, he offers a critical warning. Watch out for any orcs carrying flags on their backs. Those flags identify them as the Orc Falls, the most brutal warriors in the entire horde. But Yuri just smiles, confidently stating he already has a plan for them. Before he can explain that plan, however, his maid Emma appears at the door. She announces a visitor has arrived, bearing a very special package. Waiting for him in his office is a man who looks strikingly similar to Gori. And yet, on closer inspection, it's a completely new face. The man introduces himself as Jeremo, the personal assistant to Lane. Jeremo explains that Lady Lane couldn't miss the chance to send a gift for his upcoming mission. With a flourish, he presents a chest containing her most important gift yet. Inside rests a set of decorative daggers known as the Elementarium. At first glance, they may appear to be nothing more than ordinary blades. But Yuri knows these are incredibly valuable artifacts, each one filled with ancient magic. In fact, with just a small amount of mana, he can command them to move on their own. To prove his point, he gives Jeremo a quick demonstration. Instantly, the daggers float and spin through the air at his silent command. Just as they settle, a strange movement in the corner of the room catches Yuri's eye. The moment Jeremo has left, Yuri speaks to the apparently empty room, telling the hidden figure to come out. From the deepest shadows, a dark form begins to materialize right behind him. That flicker of movement from before belonged to the assassin, Sauna. It turns out she took his advice, and now this deadly killer works directly for him. Wasting no time, she reports that she's already done exactly as he asked. A threatening note was left right on Gorya's bed, a warning to stop interfering with the other merchants. Her duty done, her tone softens as she asks if he's really going on that dangerous mission. This professional killer, of all people, is now warning him to be careful, and despite her deadly profession, the girl can't stop herself from blushing. She then makes a solemn promise that she will always be there for him. On the day of his departure, even the ever-busy Cedric sets aside his work for a proper farewell. In return, Yuri promises his brother that he will make the name Briol proud. The two share a brief, heartfelt hug, only for their father to cut the moment short. With his arrival, the official appointment ceremony begins. His father's words are heavy, making it clear that Yuri is now responsible for more than just his own life. He is now accountable for every single soldier from the kingdom joining this mission. On the battlefield, he must never forget the weight of the precious lives resting on his shoulders. Yuri looks out at the faces of the men he now commands. He knows he can't guarantee every one of them will return unharmed. But what he can do is make sure they don't die as miserably as they did in his past life. So when his father asks if he is ready for this burden, Yuri opens his mouth to say yes, but is suddenly hit by a crushing wave of killing intent. Even though it's coming from his own father, his entire body freezes in place. Every instinct screams that the man standing before him is no longer his father, but death itself, and if he dares to make a single move, he will die. In this moment, if Yuri hesitates, he dies. But this is not his past life, and this time, he can fight back. With a surge of power, he activates his own unique mana technique. It's just enough to give him the strength to draw his sword. And with it, he perfectly parries his father's attack. Only then does his father, Fiora, reveal the truth. This was a final test before the battlefield. It was, as he congratulates a stunned Yuri, his own way of saying goodbye. His farewell tour complete, Yuri steps before his soldiers, vowing as their prince that they can trust him. Yet far away from the marching troops, inside a dark cell, an orc waits in captivity. Watching it is Count Sidor, his fist clenched in anticipation. He is eagerly awaiting his reunion with our protagonist. Meanwhile, Yuri and his Briol soldiers continue their long march. They finally stop for a brief rest, now halfway through their arduous journey. One of the knights, a man named Raymond, notes their excellent pace, knowing the area well. But from behind them, a dark voice suddenly cuts in, declaring it was all his fault. The voice belongs to Lauren, the first man Yuri ever saw die for him, and the last face he saw before his own death. And yet in this timeline, Lauren is standing right here, very much alive. The young man kneels, introducing himself as the son of a high-ranking noble. He then confesses a deep admiration for Yuri, born from hearing about his legendary duel 5 years ago. For Lauren, the prince became an inspiration, the perfect embodiment of the knight's code. That's why he's overjoyed for this chance to finally serve him. Faced with this ghost from his past, Yuri struggles just to keep his composure. Thankfully, Raymond's interruption breaks the tension. It's time to move out. Upon arriving at the Sidor territory, the welcome they receive is not the cold one they expected. Instead, a giant banner hangs in their honor reading, "Welcome, His Highness the Third Prince." On top of that, the local knights are assembled in formation, offering him the highest military honors. And at the head of them all, Count Sidor himself rides up, praising Yuri's bravery for joining the front lines so young. But his praise quickly shifts to a pointed question. Has the prince ever fought an orc before? Yuri's past life memories answer for him, of course. A split second later, he realizes his fatal mistake. In this timeline, he has no such experience. He quickly covers, claiming he studied them extensively and trusts his battle-hardened troops. To Yuri's surprise, this answer seems to make Sidor even happier. So with a chilling smile, the Count tells Yuri he has a gift for him. That gift begins with Sidor locking them all inside a dark chamber, telling them not to worry. Then, one by one, he lights the torches around the room, and in their flickering light, a single captured orc is revealed, cowering in a cage. Sidor explains that they captured this creature to study the species and learn all its weaknesses. But now, he announces, its time as a research subject is over. It's a gift for Yuri, a chance to get some much-needed practice. As one of his men begins to shake with fear, Yuri turns and asks him what's wrong. The young soldier gives him an honest answer. He never thought, he admits, that they would be asked to go this far. To him, this feels like torturing a helpless prisoner of war. To teach him the truth, Yuri orders the cage opened and tells that very soldier to go inside on guard. The orc immediately starts screaming, smashing its own face against the floor as if driven mad by torture. But it's a trick. And in a flash, the creature grabs the soldier, taking him hostage. While the other men draw their swords, Count Sidor simply tells them to relax. He reveals the orc's tendons were already severed, so it poses no real threat. Stepping forward, Yuri tells his terrified soldier to look closely at this brutal, smart, and ruthless creature. This is an orc, a true monster. And to prove his point, he calls for an interpreter named Cory. Cory listens, then translates the creature's first demand. They are to lower their weapons immediately. Because if they refuse, it will start breaking the hostage's bones, one by one. As the orc enrages, Yuri calmly tells Hernando to handle it. Hernando casts a strange spell, freezing the beast in place, but only for a moment. This brief pause only enrages the orc further, causing it to roar and unleash a terrifying aura. That's when Yuri realizes this is no ordinary orc, a suspicion Kedor immediately confirms. In fact, he explains that when they first found this monster, it was eating a knight alive. Hearing this is more than enough to make the soldiers want to tear the beast apart. But Yuri orders everyone to stay calm. He points out that the other cells are full of more orcs just like it, and all of them are just waiting for a chance to strike. So Yuri declares their real job is to use this opportunity as training to learn how to kill orcs. While the men face the creature, Hernando stays back with Yuri and Kedor to prevent things from getting out of hand. And as soon as they bring one orc down, the next one is let loose to rush in. After the brutal training, some of the men are left feeling just how weak they truly are. But Yuri reminds them that this grueling experience is exactly what will raise their odds of staying alive. In the end, their survival is what matters most. Kedor adds that while keeping them locked up is a dirty tactic, these monsters deserve no mercy. Once the training is over, he asks the men to follow him to see what the orcs are really doing. He leads them to a cell packed not with warriors, but with creatures that are far smaller and weaker. These, Kedor reveals, are half-orcs, the children of humans who were kidnapped by the beasts. The thought is so sickening that one of the soldiers nearly throws up. Even Yuri can only stare in disbelief at the horrific truth. It's a sight that drives home Kedor's next words: he will hate these creatures until the day he dies. At that moment, Yuri understands that everyone in this world has their own worst enemy. For him, the greatest evil will always be the Empire. But for Kedor, it's the orcs who wiped out his people and murdered his own son. This is the loss that has fueled his unending quest for vengeance. Which is why, the very next day, the Count asks Yuri to take a new companion with them. Kedor presents a boy named Cory, revealing he's a half-orc who wants to help their cause. Without a moment of hesitation, Yuri readily agrees, accepting Cory as one of his own men. With Cory now on the team, they get ready to cross the border, an area notorious for bandits. A recent slaughter is a grim reminder of just how deadly the bandits in this area truly are. As his group moves carefully through the forest, Yuri wonders how he'll keep the peace once his men learn Cory is a half-orc. He decides to leave that problem for Hernando to handle, and instead asks Jared to scout ahead. And Hernando, for his part, seems thrilled with the troublesome assignment. Looking at the map, Yuri suddenly decides to change their plans. Instead of avoiding the bandit territories, he thinks it's better to find them directly. This way, they can take care of two problems with one stone. As Jared rides off, Yuri shouts some praise to motivate him. Observing the exchange, Raymond notes that Yuri seems to value Jared quite a bit. But Yuri insists he only brought Jared along because he's useful. Then, catching him completely off guard, he suddenly asks Raymond why he fights. Raymond admits the answer is simple but also difficult. He fights for the safety of Brio. Hearing this is all the confirmation Yuri needs to trust him completely. Because of that, he decides to leave Raymond in charge of the main group. Yuri then rides off to join Jared in his scouting mission. Their mission is a success. They quickly capture one of the bandit scouts. The man immediately cracks, admitting he's just a rookie who was sent out on his own. But what really catches Yuri's eye is a bright red crystal necklace, something a mere rookie should never be able to afford. The terrified scout explains that his boss gave him the necklace and ordered him to wear it on patrol. Since the scout doesn't know if it's magical, Yuri realizes he'll have to figure that out for himself. Once Jared has the troops in position surrounding the camp, Yuri does the craziest thing possible and decides to charge in head-on. He crashes straight into the center of the enemy camp, shouting and smashing everything in his path. He literally drags a few unlucky bandits right out from their tents. Without a hint of doubt, he introduces himself as the man who's about to deliver the beating of their lives. A short while later, Jared and the others finally arrive at the camp. They are too late, however, and find the entire place eerily silent. The only person left is Yuri, sitting calmly by a fire amidst the bodies of the defeated bandits. He casually tells them everyone's been wiped out, but there's plenty of meat left for a good meal. The entire spectacle is so unreal that Jared doesn't know how to react when Yuri offers him some of the food. The bandit leader is beaten so badly he can barely even stand. Yet when he tries to get up, Yuri puts him right back down with a single, swift kick. With the minor threat handled, Raymond explains they'll soon meet the army of the famous, magic-using Holy Kingdom. That gives Yuri a bit of hope, wondering if they can at least count on their renowned healing skills. But Rimbaud isn't so sure, as this time the commander is none other than the Holy Kingdom's own princess. Worse, she's caught in the middle of a fierce and complicated power struggle back home. Rumor has it she plans to use this very war to prove herself, making her completely unpredictable. She'll do anything to bring her people home alive, even if it means sacrificing anyone who gets in her way. This troubling news leaves Yuri wondering what their next move should be. While Raymond suggests learning more about her first, Yuri decides he'll handle it the simplest way possible. He's going to talk to her himself. Soon, they arrive in the independent region of Guide, where military laws are so strict that even allied soldiers could be jailed for one mistake. So while the others set up camp outside the city, Yuri goes alone to meet with Lord Guide. The Lord is formal but kind, immediately promising to support Yuri however he can. He also fondly mentions how Yuri's father made major gains against the orcs during his time. Because of this legacy, he confides that he expects great things from our protagonist. And just then, as if on cue, things start turning Yuri's way as the Holy Kingdom's princess arrives at the palace. She strides in confidently with her paladins and introduces herself as Sylvia. Not just a princess, but the revered saint of the Holy Kingdom. Seeing Yuri casually seated there, she naturally asks if he's one of the Lord's vassals. She then tells him to leave the room so they can discuss important matters of state. While Yuri says nothing and Lord Guide scrambles to fix the misunderstanding, the situation quickly goes from bad to worse. One of Sylvia's own soldiers starts screaming at Yuri for not standing in the presence of her highness. That's when Yuri finally introduces himself as the third Prince of Brielle. The sudden declaration freezes everyone in place. A dead, awkward silence completely throws the entire room into chaos. After some incredibly flustered apologies from the princess's side, the tension finally eases. The three of them sit down for tea, this time introducing themselves properly. To break the ice, Yuri points out they're about the same age and should be friends, especially before fighting a war side by side. Though clearly confused by his casual demeanor, she agrees to his proposal. With that settled, they can finally start talking about what really matters. Sylvia explains that she came ahead of her main force, and her troops should arrive tomorrow morning. In response, Yuri says he hopes they make it in time. He then adds that he hopes they don't run into any trouble on the way. His comment confuses her, and she asks if he's somehow doubting her people's loyalty. But he clarifies that he meant danger from the outside, like the orcs taking a huge risk and crossing the border to ambush them. Afterward, Yuri meets with Hernando, who asks what the Holy Kingdom's paladins were really like. Yuri can only admit they seem so tense that it gives him a very bad feeling. For now, though, what matters is the bandit's necklace. According to their intel, the bandits supposedly bought it in the main market of Gold, the capital of the bandits. It's a strange item, said to attract orcs like some kind of irresistible drug. But when the expert explains this to the local sellers, they just tell him to go bother someone else. In fact, they angrily insist that no such thing has ever existed. Elsewhere, Sylvie leaves the palace and meets with Fernando, the Holy Kingdom's vice commander. Without even a proper greeting, he immediately starts trashing Yuri. He sneers that sending that idiot to lead the charge is all the proof needed that the Kingdom of Brielle is in decline. The man seems thoroughly, personally fed up with the entire situation. Sylvia immediately tells him there's no need to judge Yuri so quickly. But the man just keeps going, saying Yuri dresses like a random mercenary and will surely return to Brielle in a coffin. Sylvia finally cuts him off with a sharp, "That's enough," then asks if there's any problem with the troops on their way. He assures her everything is under control and she has absolutely nothing to worry about. And yet, he wears the exact face of someone she absolutely should be worried about. After he leaves to patrol, she's left with the distinct feeling that her own vice commander doesn't respect her at all. Later that night, Fernando and his men arrive at the casino where the Brielle soldiers are playing cards. Seeing them relaxed, he completely loses it, yelling that they're all completely undisciplined. He screams at them, demanding that they show more respect. He treats the allied forces like a joke and keeps ranting until a hand suddenly grabs his shoulder. It's Yuri, who calmly asks who he is and what the hell he thinks he's doing. Fernando recognizes him at once and violently jerks his hand away. He immediately goes right back to complaining that their lazy attitude is an insult to both him and his men. Yuri simply asks him again, who does he think he is? Because no one gets to discipline a prince, a hard fact that finally shuts the vice commander up. Just as a fight is breaking out, Sylvie appears, telling Fennec he should be patrolling instead. But the blatant disrespect gleaming in Fennec's eyes is unmistakable. Frustrated at how hard it is to keep her subordinates under control, she can only grip her sword. Watching this unfold, Yuri is reminded of what Raymond had told him. He said the princess holds very little power in the struggle for the throne, and her own knight's insolence is all the proof Yuri needs. Still, he smirks, her political problems aren't his to solve. Later, Fennec corners Sylvie, demanding to know if she's become friends with the Prince of Brielle. He then warns her against getting close to such a common and unrefined man. In Fennec's mind, a man like Yuri will only lead them straight to defeat in this war. Before Sylvie can even answer, a messenger soldier rushes in with urgent news from the main army. Their forces are currently under attack by orcs. Without a moment's hesitation, Sylvie prepares to head into battle. However, Lord Gott steps in, suggesting they ask the people of Brielle for help instead. Fennec immediately scoffs at the idea, asking if anyone really doubts they can beat a few lousy orcs. Siding with him, Sylvie thanks Lord Gott for his concern, but insists they can handle it themselves. As they leave, Lord Gott can only mutter that they're a bunch of stubborn bastards. Even so, he knows he can't just let them die. So he asks his ally to go find Yuri and the troops of Brielle immediately. He stresses that there's no time to lose. If they don't hurry, this will turn into a massacre. A few minutes later, that same messenger reaches Yuri with the news about the attack. He explains that the Holy Kingdom's forces are in dire straits. And critically, he's told that Lord Gott personally asked for the troops of Brielle to step in. Already understanding the gravity of the situation, Yuri tells the remaining soldiers in camp to get ready to move out. While riding, Lauren says how impressed he is that Yuri would help the very bastards who insulted him. He marvels that his lord is helping them without a second thought. That, Lauren declares, is the mark of a real knight. Yuri thanks him, but privately, he's thinking about how much the blonde has changed from his past life. The idea seemed crazy at first, but it's becoming clear his actions can change more than just major events. He realizes they can also change the people around him. But those thoughts quickly fade as their destination comes into view. In the distance, they finally spot the Holy Kingdom forces engaged in a desperate battle. Yuri tells everyone to listen up. This, he announces, will be their first battle against the orcs as a single unit, and he promises to be the first one into battle and the last one to leave it. Refusing to lose anyone, he cloaks himself and his horse in mana and gives one final order: survive. But before he can charge, the scene jumps back just a few minutes in time. Here, Sylvie and her men still hadn't reached the battlefield. She is already admitting to herself that she was careless, overconfident, and foolish to ignore Yuri's warning. On top of that, she regrets not taking the orcs' potential for dirty tricks seriously. Just then, they finally see the raging battle ahead. Somehow, the kingdom's troops are still holding their ground. Seeing her chance, Sylvie orders Fennec to charge straight in, planning to strike the enemy commander at once. Fennec doesn't hesitate, leading the charge as Sylvie surges forward with incredible speed from her mana method. The problem is that they're moving too fast to notice the danger ahead. A single cursed skeleton lies in wait for them, and as soon as they're in range, it activates a massive magic circle. The ground shatters beneath them, sending the entire unit plummeting into a trap they may not survive. In the midst of the panic, Sylvie's life flashes before her eyes, starting with the day her holy magic awakened. She not only succeeded but even beat her brother in swordsmanship, which turned out to be the worst mistake of her life. Seeing her strength as a threat, her brother began pushing her away, sending her to the battlefield just to keep her from the throne. That's when she realized what her brother, what everyone at the palace, truly wanted was for her to die. They all envisioned her like this, helpless on the ground, unable to move. And that's why she's fought so hard to stay alive, and why she must survive now. So, gathering the last of her strength, she forces herself up and orders her men not to stop fighting. But as she does, she feels a strange liquid on her gauntlet. Instead of blood, she's horrified to see that it's oil. When she looks up, dozens of orcs are surrounding them with torches. This wasn't just a trap, it was a giant furnace. Those bastards planned to burn them alive. This cruel but smart move proves they aren't facing ordinary enemies. Desperate, Sylvia looks for a way out, but there isn't one. She closes her eyes and waits for death. But then she hears Yuri's voice calling her name, Sivila. The next thing she sees is an orc's head flying through the air. Yuri asks if it was so hard to ask for help and whether she's still in shape to fight, then pulls her to her feet. Sylvia admits she owes him one, but Yuri brushes it off. As his men join the fight, Fennec walks up to apologize for how he acted earlier. Smiling, Yuri accepts his apology. He only hopes they'll have his back when the time comes. With Yuri's forces on the field, the battle starts to feel more even. But everything changes when one of the orcs signals a retreat. Yuri immediately orders his men not to let them escape. He then starts chasing them down himself. He comes face to face with an orc Val, exactly the kind of enemy Yuri is supposed to avoid. For a moment, Yuri freezes, appearing weak. The orc Val fires a mana-charged arrow to finish the job. However, Yuri stops it with nothing but his sword. The magical arrow shatters completely on impact. Still, he's not about to stand there and wait for the orc Val to move first. With the enemy still in sight, he activates his mana method. He charges in alone to face them. Seeing Yuri charge, one of the stronger orcs throws a spear to stop him. It reaches the protagonist's face in an instant. Almost is the key word, because Yuri remembers a crucial lesson from his teacher. Normally, you train to react to the unexpected. But his mana method lets him instantly sense everything around him and find the best move. The founder's technique guides him away from danger and toward the fastest way to kill an enemy. It's basically a spider sense, which in the present lets him dodge the spear by mere millimeters. His body moves on its own, wiping out a group of orcs in a single motion, but the fight is only starting. Now that the orcs see him as the biggest threat, they coordinate their attack. They rush him in relentless waves of 3. But now, he's using his ability better than ever before. And after so long without a real battle, he isn't about to waste this chance. Out of nowhere, he can see the exact lines where his blade must fall to kill each enemy. It reveals the best possible path for his sword. He attacks without hesitation, taking down every orc foolish enough to challenge him. Even though his body can't quite keep up with his mind, when he looks around, most of the orcs are defeated. The only one left standing is the orc Val. He challenges Yuri by throwing his spear, just like he did before. But the throw was never meant for him. Instead, the orc Val's banner falls to the ground. The surviving orcs can't believe it. They freeze, realizing someone has appeared who can stand against their leader. Their leader growls in disbelief. In that moment, the orcs stop running and stop fighting. The allied troops seize the chance and press their attack. In the middle of the chaos, Sylvia runs up to ask Yuri if he's okay. He watches his men take control, killing some, driving off the rest, and winning the battle for good. Sylvia admits it feels really good, and thanks him for his help. Meanwhile, the scene shifts, revealing that the orc Val was one of the few who escaped. He explodes with rage over the defeat and makes it clear he's planning his revenge. Back in Gita, Herod gathers the few rookies left in the tavern. He excitedly recounts every last detail of the incredible battle. The rookies are shocked since they thought Yuri was just a lazy, weak prince. Someone who only wasted the crown's money on gambling. But Lauren immediately jumps in to defend her husband, saying it's all baseless nonsense. Half drunk on beer or maybe just devotion, she insists he's the strongest in the royal line and she has plenty of proof. What they don't know is that among the curious onlookers, Asana is also watching from the shadows. And as she listens to the tale, she considers her own next move. For Yuri, it sometimes feels like he can see the future. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, a mysterious woman named Sarah asks an innkeeper if he's seen a certain man. The one she seeks, she explains, has dark brown hair and always carries a sword at his waist. On top of that, he doesn't speak the continental language well and has a noticeable accent. After a moment of thought, a flicker of recognition crosses the innkeeper's face. He does remember someone like that, a man with a strange accent who ordered risotto with no spices at all. And now that he thinks of it, that same person had asked for directions to Balsac. For Sarah, this is more than enough information to go on. So, with the silver coin as thanks for his help, she prepares to depart. She's now sure her target is heading for the Allied forces' meeting point, the exact same destination as Yuri, which means she has to find him first, because her target is the Swordsman of the East, one of the 10 strongest people on the continent. Speaking of Yuri, he and his troops continue their journey the next day, completely unaware they're being tracked. As night falls, they set traps and barriers around their camp, using advanced methods learned from the Holy Kingdom. The men work with such speed and efficiency that Yuri can't help but praise them. He makes sure to specifically thank Raymond for teaching them these invaluable skills. But while scouting the area for potential ambush points, Yuri stumbles upon something awful. He finds Cory being beaten by their own allies, accused of being a spy. Instantly, Yuri steps in, ordering the soldiers to back off before he does something he'll regret. Cory thanks him, yet pleads with him not to be too harsh, admitting he understands why the men hate him. He even says that if Yuri intervenes over something this small, it will only push Cory farther from his dream. That catches Yuri's attention, and Cory confesses his greatest wish, to do good work so he can one day live among humans. Yuri knows this won't be easy. Right now, Cory's only value to the army is as a translator. Once this mission ends, his future becomes completely uncertain. But instead of crushing the boy's hopes, Yuri gives him a piece of advice: stay close to Arnaldo and learn magic. He explains that to live among humans, Cory will need a real, tangible skill. Later that evening, Yuri meets with his commanders, Raymond, Jared, and Arnaldo. Gathered around a map, they plan for every possible ambush scenario. Jared, however, thinks Yuri is overdoing the preparations. But Yuri insists this is the bare minimum. After all, he reminds them, they are deep in orc territory, where an attack isn't just possible, it's probable. And right on cue, a panicked messenger bursts into the tent. He's shouting that the camp is under attack. Rushing outside, they find their worst-case scenario has come true. Their camp is being pummeled by a direct assault of firebombs. And to make matters worse, the enemy is using dark mana techniques. It's a full-blown witchcraft attack. After surveying the chaos, Arnaldo concludes there probably isn't an actual witch in the enemy's ranks. Instead, they're most likely just using pre-made witchcraft bombs, which means all they have to do is find and stop whoever is throwing them. Calmly, Yuri orders his lines to spread out while he personally goes after the mastermind. He turns to Arnaldo, asking which direction the sorcery is coming from. Without a moment's hesitation, Arnaldo points east. Immediately, Yuri wraps his crow in mana, boosting its power. And then he's gone, sprinting at full speed toward the enemy. Cutting through the chaos, he spots it, a patched red flag tied to the sword of an orc valet. Yuri recognizes him instantly. It's the same orc valet from before, and he's clearly back for revenge. So Yuri gives him the fight he's looking for, charging straight in. But the giant easily blocks his blade. Then, the orc valet fires back with a brutal flurry of his own powerful blows. The sheer force of the assault is so overwhelming that it compels Yuri to retreat. As they pause for a breath, he glances down to see his right arm shaking from the strain. A knot of fear tightens in his stomach as he analyzes his opponent. These aren't the movements of a normal orc, or even a high-ranking orc valet. Knowing this isn't going well, Yuri decides his best move is to create some distance. He uses the orc's relentless assault to dodge and pull back, widening the gap bit by bit. Realizing his opponent is on another level entirely, Yuri activates his mana method and charges in again, ready to test the giant's true power. Unfortunately, he may have just made a fatal miscalculation, because out of nowhere, the orc valet reveals a trump card of his own, awakening a strange and terrifying power. It's an ominous dark mana, the likes of which Yuri has never seen before. An intense wave of mana suddenly washes over him, coming directly from the orc. This discovery leaves the protagonist completely stunned. After all, orcs aren't supposed to be able to control mana, but instead of panicking, a grin spreads across Yuri's face. He's excited for the challenge of fighting one of their strongest. Knowing he has to go all out, he immediately activates his soul separation technique. With his senses now heightened, his left eye glows, allowing him to predict his opponent's every move. Just as he's ready, Orc Vault charges in for another attack. This time, however, Yuri knows exactly where to strike. He flawlessly follows the path of the sword, driving his own blade straight into the orc's neck. But the monster is so strong that he simply grabs the blade with his bare hand, stopping the attack cold. Seeing the shock on Yuri's face, Orc Valk mocks him, tasting a victory that hasn't even happened yet. In response, Yuri powers up his blade and yanks it free, severing several of the orc's fingers in the process. Orc Valk retaliates instantly with a brutal axe strike that digs deep into Yuri's shoulder. Yet instead of crying out in pain, a chilling smile spreads across Yuri's face. He knows now that weak attacks won't be enough to bring this monster down. With no more time to waste, he plants his feet, preparing for one final, decisive blow. Sensing this, Orc Valk gathers his own power, ready to meet Yuri with the same deadly intensity. They lunge forward at the same moment, and their attacks collide. The resulting clash unleashes a huge explosion of pure mana, a blast so bright it can be seen for miles. When the light finally fades seconds later, all that's left is a massive crater in the ground, and the shattered remains of a weapon. That broken weapon clearly belongs to Orc Valk. And under Yuri's cold, victorious stare, the massive warrior finally drops to the ground. Wasting no time, our protagonist moves in for the final blow. He plunges his blade straight through the orc's chest, yet, amazingly, even that isn't enough to kill him. Lying in a pool of his own blood, the defeated warrior still tries to move, still tries to fight. Yuri considers finishing him off, but then he realizes this orc might have valuable information. It's at that exact moment that Jared and the other soldiers finally arrive. They rush to ask if he's alright, but Yuri's only concern is for the safety of the camp. He only relaxes when Jared confirms that everyone is safe and sound. With that confirmed, Yuri orders all surviving orcs to be gathered, including the one he just defeated. He has plenty of questions for that one in particular. Later, after things have calmed down, Hernando arrives to treat his wounds. He can't help but tease Yuri, saying that even someone of his caliber can have a rough time in battle. But before the interrogation can begin, Yuri has his men bring something over. What they bring is a large, flashy, and utterly ridiculous throne. His men insist that a commander like him deserves to sit on something truly majestic. At first, Yuri looks horrified, but he just can't stop himself from cracking a smile. Since turning down such a thoughtful gift would be rude, he obliges and takes his seat. He sinks into the cushions, clearly enjoying the gesture more than he lets on. Then, clearing his throat, he announces that the prisoner interrogation will now officially begin. All this time, the surviving orcs have been watching, their eyes filled with pure hatred. When they refuse to speak, the torture begins. One by one, any orc who refuses to answer is punished. Their faces are forced into the searing flames of the campfire. Yuri then warns them they'll only get one chance to tell the truth before asking the next captive who ordered the ambush. In response, the orc just starts yelling a stream of curses. Even before Corey can translate, it's clear to everyone that he's spewing nothing but insults. Without a single moment's hesitation, Yuri gives the signal to Jared. Immediately, the playful look on Jared's face vanishes, replaced by a cold, serious expression. He grabs the rope tied around the orc's neck and shoves his head directly into the fire. His agonizing screams echo through the entire forest. This sight is so brutal that even Yuri's own men freeze in shock. Facing the other prisoners, Yuri calmly warns them again that he will only ask each of them once. He then takes a mana-filled dagger and drives it into the burning orc's heart, finally ending his suffering. That's when another prisoner suddenly speaks up, desperately claiming they're just soldiers who know nothing. But he reveals a crucial piece of information. The order to attack came directly from someone named Rookvalk. He then begs Yuri to spare the others, pleading with him to punish that bastard instead. The protagonist laughs, not at the betrayal, but because he knows something they don't. So he gets straight to the point, asking if the attack was ordered by someone named Okua. What they don't realize is that Okua is the name of the infamous Orc King, a monster so powerful he was the entire reason the alliance was formed. He was also the very one who wiped out most of Abriel's knights, and our MC, in his past life. Faced with this knowledge, the orc asks if he will be spared for answering honestly. Yuri agrees, but for this prisoner, a simple promise isn't enough. Instead, he demands an oath, an unbreakable pact where both sides put their honor on the line. This is something Yuri never expected to hear from an orc. Before he can even process it, Herod panics, insisting there's no way they can let a threat like this go free. Orville confirms the order came from his tribal leader, but reveals the original idea was Okua's. He doesn't know how they got the exact details of the alliance's route, only that Okua himself found them and sent forces to intercept. With that information secured, Yuri has just one last question: how strong is Okua? At this, Orville just smiles and laughs in his face, a chilling sign of the trouble they're in. He claims not even a dozen warriors like him would stand a chance against Okua. The Orc King is simply stronger and faster than anyone else in their world. Yuri doesn't deny how terrifying that sounds. Instead, he reminds the orc that humans are far more cunning as he pulls out the red crystal from earlier. That's when Orville lunges, breaking their sacred oath on the spot. But the MC doesn't even flinch, having already surrounded Orville, and coldly tells him that for someone who talks of honor, he has none. Yuri had been prepared to respect their pact, but now it's clear this orc deserves no mercy. After finishing him off, they swiftly deal with the rest of the orcs. With the battle finally over, the camp can at last get in order and begin treating the wounded. Corey rushes to bring bucket after bucket of water for the mage to purify. With his magic, it becomes blessed holy water that also heals. Corey obeys instantly, watching in amazement as a few seconds of magic turns faces of deep pain into pure relief. And as he watches the mage work, Corey realizes this could be his own path. While German is quick to thank only the mage for his work, Hernando makes sure not to ignore Corey's effort, saying he deserves credit too. But seeing the damage from a mere ambush, one that wasn't even part of the main battle, leaves German with a terrible feeling. Hernando, however, argues it may not be as bad as he thinks and tells him to look around. He points out that even after such a dangerous fight, every single one of them survived. And now, they're all helping each other recover. Some are caring for the wounded while others play music to lift everyone's spirits. Deciding to do his part, Hernando sends a beam of energy into the sky. The magic blooms across the night, filling it with brilliant northern lights. This spectacular sight immediately brings smiles to everyone there. This includes Corey, who now looks at Hernando with a newfound hope in his eyes. He seizes the moment, asking if Hernando will please teach him magic. The request catches Hernando completely off guard. He admits it's been a long time since anyone has asked him that. Curious, he asks Corey why he wants to learn magic. Corey confesses he now understands that magic can make people smile, and that's exactly what he wants to do. After a moment of thought, Hernando muses that a half-orc who can use magic sounds pretty amazing. With a warm smile, he makes it clear he is more than willing to take Corey on as his apprentice. Much later, just as they're ready to move out again, several knights from the Empire arrive to meet them. They ask for a private word with Yuri before the official Balsac Alliance meeting begins. From the protagonist's calm reaction, it's clear he was already expecting this. He simply welcomes the Imperial Knight, a man named Raoul. Raoul politely introduces himself as part of the advance force, explaining his team has already reached Balsac. However, they discovered groups of orcs nearby and came back to warn the main force so they wouldn't be caught off guard. Yuri thanks him for the warning and then asks about the silent knight standing behind him. That's when the man finally speaks, apologizing for not introducing himself, and cryptically adds that he isn't exactly in the most honorable place in his career right now. Yuri instantly recognizes the man standing before him. The irony is crushing, since this very night represents the darkest, most painful moment of his past. And when the knight introduces himself as Graham, Yuri knows for sure it's the same man who spared his life and let him escape. Graham explains that he recently lost his title, but Yuri, unconcerned with such things, simply states it's a pleasure to meet him. Deeply embarrassed, Graham admits that he's now fighting without any official title or rank to his name. But before the shame can fully set in, Raoul cuts in, loudly declaring that Graham did nothing wrong. His only mistake, Raoul insists, was having the wrong mentor. Agreeing, Yuri calls Graham the most honorable man he's ever met, claiming to have heard great things about him. That's when he makes his move, offering Graham a place within Briol's ranks. Even though he despises the Empire's knights, Yuri knows in his heart that Graham has always been different. He understands that for the kindness of letting him go, Graham must have paid a heavy price. And in this life, Yuri is determined to repay that debt. Yet without a moment's hesitation, Graham flatly refuses the offer. With that business concluded, the group continues their journey until they finally reach the city of Balzac. It's a metropolis far larger and more imposing than Yuri ever imagined. The entire city is surrounded by an impossibly tall, seamless wall. A feat of engineering like this could only have been constructed by the most talented mages in the world. But as soon as they pass through the gates, Hernando gives Yuri a stark warning. This city is filled with powerful people who would swallow him alive just for their own amusement. Just then, he is caught completely off guard by the arrival of the Duchess, a stunning redhead named Mayros. Not only is she beautiful, but she greets Yuri with a surprising, almost effusive, kindness. She welcomes him with an incredible display of respect. But the moment he explains he's the one leading Briol's troops, her demeanor shifts and she begins flirting, asking how old he is. Yuri replies that he just turned 18, to which she exclaims, "That's perfect, since she herself is only 4 years older." Unfazed, he tells her that if two people share the same values, they can be friends regardless of their background, age, or gender. It's a polite but firm way of telling her to drop the act, and she immediately takes the hint. Without missing a beat, she smoothly transitions back to the day's formalities. It is time, she announces, to meet their allies from Brusen, the very men who will fight alongside them. Later, back at their table, Herod asks where the country of Brusen is even located. Yuri explains that it's a small, unassuming country near the sea. He describes it as a nation known for being tough, steady, and rather plain. And right on cue, the commander of Brusen's troops approaches their table carrying a bottle of wine. Introducing himself as Jonathan, he quickly pours a glass for Yuri. But instead of accepting, Yuri bluntly asks if the drink is really wine from Brusen. After all, he points out, something so refined surely couldn't have come from such a simple country. In an instant, the polite smiles plastered on the Brusen knights' faces disappear. They are replaced by dark, menacing glares. One of Jonathan's men is so enraged that he almost lunges across the table. Jonathan holds his man back, telling him to calm down, before turning to Yuri and asking if that was a joke or a deliberate insult. For a moment, he says Yuri should apologize for his disrespectful remark. However, he then reconsiders, adding that perhaps an apology isn't what's needed here. As he sees it, Yuri's outrageous attitude can only mean one of two things. Either he's the arrogant jerk the rumors claim he is, or he's testing them to see if they are truly worthy allies. Yuri rises to his feet, confirming it's the latter by declaring there is nothing more dangerous than an untrustworthy ally on the battlefield. Jonathan replies that a knight can only prove his worth through his skill, which is the exact opening Mayros was waiting for. Clapping her hands with glee, she tells them all to follow her to the training grounds. Brusen's chosen representative is Laurent, the very same man who almost attacked Yuri just moments before. From the stands, Mayros casually comments that while Yuri was rude, she doesn't mind as long as it leads to some good entertainment. But Yuri knows the truth. She anticipated this exact outcome and had planned for it all along. Still, the match works to his advantage, giving him a perfect chance to get a closer look at Brusen's men, because he knows that hidden among them is a man destined to become one of the 10 strongest fighters on the entire continent. A destiny that will unfold just like his father's. Sadly, he can't quite remember which one it is. But, as the first match begins, he hopes the answer will reveal itself. After all, there's no better way for men to start a friendship than with a solid fight, and he watches as Laurent takes his stance. Immediately, his opponent Pronin starts running his mouth, claiming Laurent is just some pampered noble who built a name on family status and fancy tournament wins. Assuming Laurent has never seen a real battlefield, he charges in with absolute confidence. Laurent, however, simply meets the charge with an ice-cold stare. With textbook precision, he dodges every single thing thrown at him. From the sidelines, Yuri can tell that while Laurent's style isn't flashy, it has no clear flaws. If this keeps going, he's sure Laurent's victory is inevitable. But just as that thought crosses his mind, an unexpected move changes everything. The sudden reversal is so shocking it even makes Jonathan jump to his feet. And yet, the only one not surprised is Yuri, who calmly admits he expected it. In fact, he knew from the start that Laurent would overwhelm his opponent in just 2 moves. First, he pins him down. Then, he places the tip of his sword directly at his throat. It all happened so fast the dust hadn't even settled, and Yuri can't help but get excited because Laurent never leaves an opening. His opponent took the bait, going straight for the shoulder, but that's exactly what triggered the trap. With a flick of his wrist, Laurent killed the force behind the strike, shifting his balance inward at the perfect moment. From there, he redirected the attack entirely, turning it into his own move and landing a perfect cut to the neck. Defeated, Pronin can only laugh and admit he lost fair and square, offering his hand as a sign of respect for Laurent's skill. To everyone's delight, knights from both sides erupt in cheers and applause for the spectacular match. That's when Jonathan praises Yuri for the talent of his men, to which Yuri replies that Jonathan's fighter wasn't bad either. But he follows it up with a warning: Jonathan had better not back out now. Jonathan's answer is immediate, calling for a man named Jose to represent them in the next round. Without a single moment of hesitation, Jose steps into the arena. This new fighter has a massive build and an absurdly huge sword to match. In fact, most people probably couldn't even lift the damn thing. With a proud grin, Jonathan boasts that Jose isn't just the strongest in his unit, but is bound to become the strongest in all of Brucyon. Hearing this, Yuri just smiles, thinking to himself, bingos. That's when he calls on Jared to handle this new opponent. For a brief moment, Jared hesitates, visibly intimidated. Seeing this, Yuri immediately yells at him to stop being a coward and get moving. Shoved into action, Jared steps up until he's face-to-face with Jose, or more accurately, face-to-chest, since Brucyon's knight is absolutely enormous. And even though Jose puts on a friendly act, Jared can't stop the cold sweat from breaking out. Beneath that smile, he can tell this is the face of a man who will do anything to win. Sensing his opponent's apprehension, Jose notices Jared sizing him up. So, he decides to give him a little sample of his power. In a flash, he throws a direct strike, putting the full, terrifying weight of that massive sword behind it. For a split second, Jared almost tries to block, but thinks better of it and dodges at the last possible moment. A direct hit like that wouldn't just lose him the match, it would kill him. From that point on, the fight devolves into a desperate hunt, with Jared doing everything he can just to stay away from the giant. But Jose gives him absolutely no room to breathe. The pressure is relentless. Watching from the side, Yuri muses that this man has the raw strength of an orc, yet wields his sword with the skill of a master. On top of that, he wastes no energy on useless moves, a sign of true battlefield intelligence. That dangerous combination could easily make him one of the strongest men alive someday. And just as Yuri finishes his assessment, Jose lifts Jared up like a sack of potatoes and brutally slams him into the ground, winning the match. With the bout decided, Yuri calmly announces that the score is now 1-1. He declares that this should be more than enough for both sides to gauge each other's potential. Hearing this, Mayros chimes in, asking if this means they're all done getting acquainted. Yuri confirms that they are, but she just steps closer, her voice turning seductive as she complains that he still hasn't done anything to get to know her. For a tense moment, it looks like her charm might have actually worked until Yuri shoots her a hard glare, and she instantly gets the message to back off. Just then, Jonathan breaks the awkward tension by reminding them of his promise to show them his office, insisting they go now because he's dying of curiosities. His interruption saves them from an even more awkward mess, but just as the 3 of them are about to leave, Yuri suddenly makes an excuse. He claims he needs to check on his men first. Before they can even reply, he rushes off, leaving them completely behind. And his sudden departure leaves Mayros standing there, more confused and frustrated than ever before. As time passes, the rest of the Allied forces finish arriving in Balzac. To everyone's surprise, this even includes the Empire's supreme commander. During the first few days, every army spends its time sizing up the others. Everyone except Riol's troops, as Yuri orders them to focus only on training. This makes Hernando anxious, since the other commanders have already started meeting to form alliances. Yuri understands his concern but dismisses those meetings as weak, half-baked alliances. This war has gathered the strongest fighters from each nation, so all anyone really cares about is proving they're better than everyone else. In their arrogance, they are all underestimating the enemy they're here to fight. In the end, the best thing they can do is show their strength in battle, and for that they need more training. So he proposes a small duel between his own men, and the first to step forward is Lauren. He walks up confidently and says he wouldn't dare insult Yuri by underestimating him. With that, they both take their stances. Lauren activates his mana method, giving off a clean, stable energy that's even brighter than the protagonist's. Yuri admits Lauren is an excellent training partner. Lauren then comes at him hard. MC blocks the first strike, but it's followed by a storm of attacks that are fast and scarily precise. Yuri keeps dodging, but he can tell the sword path is so perfect that sooner or later he'll be the one to slip up. It makes him remember the moment Lauren killed him in the past, where even as a walking corpse his cut was still perfectly accurate. He realizes Lauren may go even farther in this life, and Yuri wants to be worthy of leading him to victory. More importantly, he wants to be worthy of facing him head-on. With that thought, he throws a powerful strike that kicks up sand. The force of the blow forces Lauren to pull back for a few seconds. He then charges in again as if his life depends on it. That brief pause gives the protagonist just enough time to brace himself. He takes the hit with a confident grin that sets the crowd off in excitement. Jared, watching from the sidelines, thinks they are both ridiculous. Then a voice behind him says, "The Prince of Breel has incredible skill." When he turns around, Jared is met by the shadow of Jonas, greeting him like an old friend. A second later, Jonas starts yelling for Yuri. He shouts that he wants to fight too. Yuri immediately agrees and promises him an unforgettable duel against Jared, which is not what Jonas meant at all. Still, he goes with it and points at Jared. He then drags the poor guy off to a clearer spot so they can have their fun. With their match over, Lauren thanks Yuri and says he is already looking forward to the next one. Yuri then walks over to a tree nearby and asks if there has been any progress. He is not talking to himself, but to Asana, who emerges from the shadows. She praises him on how much his skills have improved. She adds that her search for the outsider is going well. This outsider is one of the strongest men on the continent. He's also the only person in Yuri's past life who stood against Okwa and dared to fight that monster alone. Back then, the protagonist never learned why he hated Okwa enough to risk his life like that. However, he knows he will need that man to win this war. So he tells Asana to hurry her search. He cannot afford to wait, because if things go like last time, that man will be devoured, leaving an empty place among the 10 strongest. Later, Yuri attends a strategy meeting led by the Emperor's half-brother and supreme commander of the Allied forces, Ragna. Ragna is an imposing man that MC remembers from his past life. The memory takes him back to the palace. It happened back when he was still seeing Trina. The two of them were kissing in an unused room. She asked him to be more careful so they would not get caught. Yuri insisted no one was around and promised that, no matter what happened, he would take responsibility. Just as they were about to kiss again, Ragna spoke up from a nearby couch. He told them to stop talking and find a room that was actually empty. Ragna said he didn't care that they were together. He simply asked Yuri if he truly cared about his niece. When Yuri said yes, Ragna brushed the whole thing aside and trusted them to handle it themselves. Even from that brief meeting, the protagonist could tell Ragna was a deep person, which makes him wonder why the hell he is making everyone wait so long now. And the one to answer their unspoken question is Ragna himself. Without anyone sensing him, he suddenly appears behind them, putting Yuri on edge. To make his point crystal clear, he activates his mana method, unleashing a crushing pressure on everyone in the room. With every eye on him, Ragna declares one simple truth: he hates cowards. He states that he will personally kill anyone who tries to run, but that otherwise they will all be treated like knights. This means, he explains, that rewards will be based solely on results. Realizing Ragna values trust and initiative, Yuri is the first to raise his hand. He immediately wants to know how the Empire rates the orcs' current strength. This brings a smile to Ragna's face. He's heard a lot about Yuri from Prince Jorge. With the introductions over, he reveals critical new intel about the orcs. A terrifying figure named Okwe has united the 3 great tribes into a single, massive force. On top of that, an enemy camp is confirmed near Balzac, which means the first battle begins in just 1 day. The only problem is, he needs a volunteer for the most dangerous position, the vanguard. Without a moment's hesitation, Ragna asks Yuri to take on that very role. Later that night, Yuri finds a rare moment of peace by the fire. But that peace is quickly broken when Fiore joins him. She starts by congratulating him on being chosen for the vanguard. But then she wonders aloud how someone who doesn't look impressive secured such a vital position. Fiore admits that with her people's lives on the line, she needs to know who she's dealing with. so she demands he answer honestly if he wants to earn her trust. And if she likes his answer, she might even offer her help in the battle to come. Skeptical, Yuri asks how exactly she could possibly help, to which Fiore reminds him that she is known as the Mage Duchess for a very good reason. Finally opening up, Yuri admits the first battle will bring heavy losses and that the vanguard is a death sentence. He just can't stop worrying about his men. Even now, he watches them eating and laughing together. They have no idea that tomorrow they could all be cold corpses. And it's all because he selfishly chose to accept the vanguard role. That heavy thought weighs on him more than anything. He confesses that he just wants to carry that burden the right way. Those honest words leave Fiore completely moved. In that moment, Fiore stands and steps closer to Yuri. She admits that while she dislikes how he can't see her as a woman, she will still help him in this first battle. Together, she declares, they will challenge fate itself. And with that, Yuri takes her hand, sealing their new pact. The very next day, the war between the orcs and the allied forces officially begins. But as the battlefield falls silent before the charge, Ragna questions why Fiore is standing beside him. After all, the vanguard is about to move and she should be at her designated post. She simply replies that she was asked to help, and she could not refuse. Just then, the great horn sounds, giving the signal to advance. Down below, Yuri steadies his horse, ready for the charge. He turns to his soldiers, rallying them for the battle of their lives. And with a final war cry, the vanguard surges forward. They thunder across the field, straight towards a solid wall of orcs waiting to tear them apart. Yet Yuri isn't just leading them, he's at the very front of the charge, spearheading the attack. But what he doesn't know is that someone far stronger is covering him from behind, as Fiore finally raises her staff. This, she declares, is exactly what she came here to do. In mere seconds, she conjures a massive fireball, one large enough to cover the entire vanguard. And without a shred of mercy, she hurls it directly at the enemy army. The colossal sphere of flame hurtles towards the clash, where only a few meters now separate the orcs from Yuri's men. Seeing this, Ragna yells that at this rate, the allied troops will burn too. But Fiore tells him not to worry, because this is exactly what Yuri wanted. From their vantage point, they watch as Yuri uses the precious opening she created. He leaps from his horse, diving straight into the orc ranks. He cuts them down so fast they don't even know what hit them. Yet, as the shadow of the fireball looms and the flames reach for him, he doesn't panic. Instead, he reaches into his tunic and pulls out one of the mysterious daggers. That's when he thrusts it into the ground, summoning a massive, churning wall of water. The water erupts, shielding his men completely from the inferno, while the orcs just beyond them are burned to nothing but ash. Even after the hell Fiore unleashed, Brielle's men are somehow still standing strong. Using the floodwaters as cover, they charge fearlessly through the battlefield. And now, the steam from the fire and water allows them to strike with the element of surprise. Their enemies are completely helpless against this ingenious tactic. Meanwhile, Yuri guards his men's backs, unleashing a storm of magical daggers. He takes down one target after another with unnerving accuracy. Instantly, the blades fly back into his hands, ready for the next kill. But should an orc ever get too close, Yuri's men are there in a flash to protect their prince. Jonas, fighting deep in the vanguard, can't help but be impressed, remarking that this is exactly what he expected from the famous land of knights. With that, he leaps from his horse, sweeping through a group of orcs with his massive sword. At the same time, the Holy Kingdom's troops join the fray, with Sylvia herself ordering them to protect Brielle's valiant knights. Watching from afar, Fiore is stunned, admitting that while she initially refused the plan, that bastard somehow talked her into it. She's forced to concede. Maybe he's not as crazy as he looks. Later that night, Fiore finds herself writing the official report on the battle. In it, she admits the victory was all thanks to one person, the Prince of Brielle. But that doesn't give him the right to just walk into her room uninvited. Yet, the intruder is not Yuri at all, but Hernando. He teleports right beside her, casually stating she should treat her old master with a little more respect. Without waiting for a reply, he takes a seat directly across from his former student. Fiore immediately fires back that no real teacher would have abandoned the student the way he did. Ignoring her anger, Hernando simply says he's here to check on her research. Specifically, he's interested in the Transcendent Interpretation Formula, a powerful spell designed to decipher the true meaning behind messages. And the reason he wants it? To understand the fate of Yuri. This revelation leaves Fiore completely stunned. She can only warn him that a grand mage of his status should never meddle in the course of human history. To which Hernando simply replies, "I already know." He then adds that more and more people are getting tangled in Yuri's fate, including the Empire's own commander. Speaking of the commander, Yuri is summoned by Ragna for a new mission. Yuri can hardly believe it. They're already planning another major offensive. Ragna explains that tomorrow's plan is to push deep into the eastern plains, the very heart of Orkland. Because of this, he anticipates constant, brutal ambushes from the enemy. The entire army will be forced to advance under crushing pressure. Yuri instantly puts the pieces together. His role is to operate as a separate unit, scouting ahead to protect the main formation. However, he points out that since Briol's troops already took the vanguard, it's only fair another nation gets a chance. After all, someone else deserves an opportunity to stand out. But Ragna disagrees, stating he only trusts the skills he has seen with his own eyes. For that very reason, he wants to keep Briol's troops right where they are, at the front. In response, Yuri just smiles, offering an alternative idea that could satisfy everyone. Just a few minutes later, the other commanders receive a surprising notice about a contest to select the recon unit. The contest is an orc hunt. Each nation must kill as many orcs as possible and cut off their right ears as proof. And the total number of ears collected will determine each nation's standing in all future battles. Observing from the shadows, Hernando instantly knows this was Yuri's doing. And Yuri admits it, explaining that this is the perfect way to test what each nation is truly capable of. But Jared is quick to remind him that reconnaissance has never been one of Briol's strengths. Yuri just tells him not to worry, because he already has a foolproof plan. The very next day, Ragna briefs the chosen representatives on their new mission. He stands before the assembled troops, ready to begin the contest. First, the main force will advance exactly as planned. Meanwhile, the select groups from each nation will spread out and scout the surrounding area. Their one and only job, hunt as many orcs as they can find. With a sharp reminder that there's a time limit, he flips the massive hourglass. And with that single motion, the contest officially begins. Without a moment's hesitation, Yuri, Sylvia, and Jonas charge into the wilderness to begin the hunt. As he watches them go, Commander Ragna can't help but crack a small smile. He thinks to himself that while the Prince of Briol is undoubtedly still young, there's no denying the boy has completely captured his attention. If Yuri can deliver results just one more time, Ragna might just start to see him as something more than a prince, but a true asset. Before long, the group spots their target, an orc cavalry unit, and immediately moves toward them. To draw their attention, Yuri brandishes the famous red gem necklace. The effect is instantaneous, as the creatures lock onto the gem like it's a beacon. With bloodlust in their eyes, the entire charging horde diverts its course, heading straight for them. Yet Yuri holds his ground, telling the others to go all out. He adds just one strange condition: they need to keep the orcs' ears intact. With that simple command, the slaughter begins as Yuri leads the charge. It quickly becomes clear the necklace doesn't just make the orcs violent, it makes them stupid, turning them into easy prey for the group. But just as things seem to be going too smoothly, a hulking orbital joins the enemy forces. This one's presence is even more terrifying than the last one Yuri killed. Even so, Yuri doesn't flinch, continuing to move forward without a shred of fear. In a single powerful swing, he takes its head clean off. This was all possible because Yuri had prepared two things for this mission: the bandit's necklace and his magic daggers. But these daggers aren't just for long-range attacks. They have a few other tricks up their sleeve. As proof, he pulls out one of those special daggers. Then he does something unexpected, stabbing it straight into the ground. Instantly, a wave of golden energy erupts from the earth, surrounding his entire team. With this new power activated, he confidently declares they will wipe out every last orc in the area before heading back. This powerful technique is called soul separation, a unique mana method that can shape things according to the user's will. It means with just a bit of creativity, the possibilities are nearly endless. By pouring mana into that seismic dagger and driving it into the ground, he sends out waves of his own mana across the plains. This allows him to sense any movement across the entire Arland Plains, turning the battlefield into his own personal sensor network. After a successful hunt, we return to the main force where Ragna stands before an hourglass. He announces that time is up and that it's time to count how many orcs each team has killed. First up are some poor fools who somehow couldn't find a single enemy. With a sneer, Ragna calls them utterly pathetic. He even remarks that it should be statistically impossible to be so completely useless. But then, Brunson and Jonathan step forward, handing over a bag containing 6 ears. As it's the best result so far, Jonathan humbly explains they just got lucky and found a scouting unit. Ragna simply replies that luck is also a skill, because bad luck will get you killed in battle. Next, he takes a bag from an Imperial unit he personally sent out, so they wouldn't be left out of the competition. They killed 12 orcs, a solid result, especially considering they started an hour later than everyone else. This blatant favoritism clearly annoys Sylvia, who feels like Ragna is just mocking them. Acting as if he's already won, Ragna insists that on the battlefield, results are all that matter. However, that smug smile vanishes when a subordinate reminds him there's one more bag to count. The man sets down a massive sack, one that clearly holds around 40 ears, and asks Yuri for his secret. In response, Yuri simply says nothing at all. Later that night, the victory breeds resentment, as a knight from another nation intentionally slams his shoulder into Herod. Herod tries to brush it off, but the provocations just keep coming. Finally fed up, he approaches Yuri, reporting that knights from the other nations have been picking fights with their men. Yuri, who completely expected this, calmly tells him it's just jealousy over their success. He says what really matters right now is dealing with their captured orcs, especially a shaman that Corey has been trying to interrogate. Just then, that very shaman starts screaming like a madman, repeating the words black dogs over and over again. The knight, Corey, explains that a new rumor has been spreading like wildfire among the orcs. It's a rumor about a certain knight who can track them down like a relentless dog. Herod can't help but laugh, immediately realizing they must be talking about Yuri. But Corey warns him not to take it as a compliment. This means the orcs now see Yuri as a real and legitimate threat. For a moment, our protagonist's ego gets a little boost from his new, fearsome title. But then he realizes the nickname also implies he's nothing more than the Empire's lapdog. His mood flips in an instant. He furiously orders his men to cut the screaming bastard's head off. Luckily, Corey manages to step in and calm him down before he does anything too rash. He reminds Yuri that these prisoners are the most talkative orcs they've captured so far. In fact, the prisoners have just revealed that Corey, one of the Central Tribe's deadliest warriors and a direct subordinate of Okwa, is preparing to face the Allied forces. On top of that, Corey adds that Corey's plan is to wipe them all out before they even get a chance to reach Okwa. Having heard enough, Yuri thanks Corey for his hard work and tells Herod they can finally kill the prisoners. With the intel secured, he immediately heads off to report everything he's learned to Ragna. The last thing Yuri expects when stepping into Ragna's tent is to be completely ambushed. Because instead of battle plans, the blonde general immediately asks him if he has a girlfriend. On top of that, he casually offers to introduce Yuri to his very cute niece once the war is over. Fleeing as if from a war zone, Yuri tries to escape the menace, only to run right into Sylvia. Her kind attempt to calm his panic is surprisingly effective. And that's when it hits him. The perfect way to get Ragna off his back is to pretend he's already dating someone. Of course, the only person for the job is Sylvia. With a plan already forming, he grabs her by the shoulders. He not so subtly reminds her of the life debt she owes him before declaring that he needs her help. There's just one condition. It has to remain their secret. Without another word, he's gone, leaving her completely bewildered. Just then, Valet appears from the shadows, remarking on how great the two of them look together. In fact, he declares his full support should she decide to go after the Prince of Brioil. He even punctuates his blessing with a firm thumbs up. By the next day, as the Allied troops march onward, Herod approaches to say he's already heard the rumors. Apparently, Ragna's constant summons aren't for war strategy, but to arrange a political marriage for Yuri. And the proposed bride is none other than Ragna's famous niece, Trina. But their conversation is cut short when an unusual number of crows begins to circle overhead. Yuri knows this can only mean one thing. Something is terribly wrong. So, he races ahead of the main army to investigate the path forward. What he finds is worse than anyone imagined, a narrow pass littered with mangled corpses. Ragna grimly identifies the torn-apart civilians not as casualties of war, but as the enemy's gruesome welcome. Yet Yuri realizes this is far more than just a warning. This is one of the creature's sick, territorial displays. Since the rest of the army is still behind them, Yuri insists they must clear the bodies before morale plummets. Ragna agrees, immediately ordering the Brioil soldiers to burn every last trace of the slaughter. That's when he notices two of his men have ventured too deep into the canyon. He orders them back, but they ignore the command, pressing on until one of them spots something strange. Unlike the other bodies, this one has arrows shot from above. This wasn't just a road. It was a trap, a realization that comes too late as dozens of orcs suddenly appear on the cliffs. Without a moment's hesitation, they fire a volley, felling one of the soldiers in an instant. His partner screams a warning to the army, they're under attack. But as he turns, he sees a second volley of arrows rushing straight for him. He knows he can't escape in time. Then, at the very last second, Yuri intervenes. He throws himself in front of the soldier, shielding him from the deadly barrage. A powerful burst of energy erupts from his body, stopping the arrows in their tracks. Seeing the man is still alive, he tells them both to run back. They are to find the Holy Kingdom troops, who can provide immediate aid. And just as suddenly as they appeared, the orcs calmly retreat, their warning shot delivered. Such arrogance proves they believe they can wipe out the entire army whenever they please. Being toyed with like this makes Yuri's blood boil with rage. But knowing a full assault now would be suicide, he swallows his anger and reports everything to Ragna. Trapped by the narrow pass with no way around, Ragna listens intently to the report. Within moments, he devises a new plan. He'll use an archery unit to keep the bastards pinned down, while he and his elite troops take the top of the ravine. Far above, an orc lookout spots movement from below. It's a wave of arrows, flying straight and fast toward his position. The volley slams into the cliff's edge, but this is no miss. It is the first warning shot from Ragna's archers, with orders to keep the enemy boxed in. While the arrows serve as a distraction, Yuri begins scaling the steep cliff face at an incredible speed. The rest of the elite soldiers follow closely behind him. They know this is the only way to catch the enemy off guard. The problem is, the orcs anticipated this exact move and answer by dropping a huge rock right on his head. This onslaught only forces him to get bolder. In a flash, he releases all his magic daggers, guiding them with pure mana. The daggers embed themselves into the cliff, clearing away smaller rocks and forming a makeshift stairway. And that buys him just enough time to free his hands and split the massive boulder clean in two. As impressive as that move was, he knows it's not one he can repeat, forcing him to use his sword just to keep from falling. That close call is all the motivation he needs, so he throws his remaining strength into reaching the top, where a welcoming party of orcs is already waiting. Instantly, they start shouting the same two words Yuri recognizes from before, Black Dog. Letting them know exactly who he is, he charges forward with everything he has. His blade becomes a blur of death, cutting through chests, arms, and heads, anything foolish enough to be in his path. Even with one arm, a single brute hits so hard that Yuri can barely block, knowing it would be far worse if the orc had both. So, trying to stay calm, Yuri taunts the creature. But his taunts are useless, as more and more orcs just keep gathering around him. The circle tightens until he's even more surrounded than before, with no room to breathe. That's when one of the bastards almost drives a giant spear straight into his back. Barely blocking the blow, he screams for Jared and the others to hurry up. At this rate, he knows he can't keep this up for much longer. Luckily, just as he's about to be overwhelmed, Jared shouts back that they're almost at the top. Seconds later, Jared and Lauren finally crest the ledge, pausing for just a breath before joining the fight. And little by little, the rest of his unit finally makes it to the summit. What was once a desperate 20-against-3 fight suddenly explodes into a full-scale battle. One after another, the orcs begin to drop. The tide has officially turned, all under the confident gaze and proud laugh of Ragna. With the canyon finally secured, Yuri and Jared meet back in camp to discuss their next move against Karuna. With every step they take, their main stronghold gets closer. That's when the blonde man mentions that Sylvia sent word, and she's not at all happy that Yuri is getting all the credit. Still, she is willing to send a couple of priests his way, should he need them. Always ready for gossip, Herod immediately asks if there's something going on between Yuri and Sylvia, a rumor Yuri instantly shuts down. But after sending Herod back to his tent, Yuri finally notices Asana has been standing silently behind him for hours. She finally speaks, her voice low, confirming she's found the man they were looking for. He's located deep inside orc territory. However, he isn't working with them, nor is he fighting against them. Instead, he's being held as a prisoner of war. The problem is, the security was so tight that even she couldn't get close enough to free him. Because of this, she warns Yuri to be extremely careful from this point forward. All Asana knows is that he's called the Foreigner, and she's only ever heard terrible things about him. She has a gut feeling that if this man and the Allied forces were to cross paths, it would not go well. In fact, she's worried they might even turn on each other. So Asana asks if she should continue digging for more information. Yuri, however, calms her, saying he'll just talk to the man himself when they finally meet. After all, he's certain the Foreigner wants Okua's head more than anyone. If they can just share that common goal, this man could become an incredibly powerful ally. For now, he simply needs Asana to keep an eye on the Foreigner until he arrives, a request she agrees to with visible hesitation. She then insists on going with Yuri when he meets him, just in case he needs her protection. But Yuri stands firm, reminding her that he did not hire her to be his bodyguard. He absolutely will not let her risk her life for him. He will be the one to protect himself. From the look on her face, it's clear she did not take that well. Yuri immediately tries to smooth things over, but it's already too late. Without another word, Asana simply vanishes back into the shadows. She remains completely focused on finishing her mission. Later that night, Jared is telling the soldiers a wildly exaggerated story of how they met the Death Knight, painting himself as a seasoned hero. When the others look to Yuri, asking if any of it is true, he decides to play along. He just says Jared did the best he could, letting his friend enjoy the glory for a little longer. Before long, Jared shifts from simple bragging to giving them a full life lesson, complete with endless wise remarks. But the light-hearted mood shatters the moment Yuri notices a figure in rags standing just behind them. His entire focus shifts to this mysterious, silent presence. He jumps to his feet, realizing the looming figure is far too large to be human. It's an orc, and he orders everyone to get ready for a fight. And yet, when Jared and the others finally turn to face it, the enemy is gone. Jared asks if he just saw things wrong, telling him to get some sleep. But Yuri insists the orc is still there. In fact, the figure is standing right there in front of them all. Somehow, though, Yuri is the only one who can see it. And just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure fades away like a dissipating shadow. Yuri knows that was far too real to be a mere trick of the light. Without a second thought, he gives chase, plunging deep into the dark forest. He realizes what it must be, a scout armed with some kind of powerful invisibility skill. He strikes with a blow powerful enough to kill a man. Instead of dying, the shadow creature simply breaks apart. The dark mass drops onto him from above. It stretches creepily over his body, clinging to his armor. He instinctively uses his mana method to tear the shadow off. Feeling traces of the dark aura still on him, he goes to Hernando for answers. Yuri finds Hernando in the middle of a serious poker game. Hernando initially tries to brush him off, annoyed by the interruption. He suggests that he use sorcery to hide, and Yuri only saw it because of his sharp instincts. The thought of invisible orcs poses a serious new danger for the next battle. Yuri realizes he needs to figure out a countermeasure. Hernando explains that magic has its limits in combat. He warns that the orcs are using a particularly dangerous branch of dark magic. Therefore, instead of using more magic, he plans to cancel and break the enemy shaman's spells himself. Yuri thanks him for the help. He then jokingly warns Hernando that they'll have a problem if he isn't invited to the next poker night. The scene shifts to Karui's hideout, where he meets with the sorcerer who was spying on Yuri. After reporting his findings, the sorcerer casts a powerful spell that appears to boost the entire orc army. The next day, Commander Ragna orders a full-scale assault on the Karuch orc camp. The horns of war sound the beginning of the attack. Braelda's forces once again take the lead, charging ahead. They rush toward the fortress walls, only to be met immediately by the enemy archers. A storm of arrows, far more than anticipated, fills the sky. Yuri orders a retreat, but many of his men are hit and fall. He feels the weight of responsibility for every man lost, but forces himself to push forward. It becomes clear that his forces were never the main attack, they were merely bait. As the orcs are distracted, the blonde commander Ragna orders the main gate to be opened. The Imperial army brings up a massive battering ram and smashes through the gate in a single blow. The breach creates a perfect opening for the main army to charge in and catch the orcs by surprise. Yuri orders his men to halt, seeing that Ragna's forces have broken through the main gate. He declares their job as bait is done, and it's time to join the main assault. Suddenly, Jonas rides up and interjects with a new plan. He suggests they use the frontal assault as a distraction to strike the orc camp from the rear. Yuri agrees with the strategy but points out they lack a battering ram. The rear gate will be heavily fortified, making a quick breakthrough difficult. Jonas simply says they don't need a siege weapon and draws his massive sword, ready to handle it himself. With total confidence, Jonas unleashes a powerful attack on the wall. A massive wave of mana surges from his sword. The fortification tears apart in a single, devastating strike. He creates an opening the orcs never expected anyone could make. Without wasting a moment, an impressed Yuri praises Jonas and orders the charge. He cuts down the first orc in their path. Yuri yells to his men that it's time to show everyone their true strength. They fight not just for the allied forces, but for the glory of their kingdom, Briol. A group of orcs immediately lowers their spears to form a defensive line, but Herod shatters their weapons. Yuri is surprised, noticing Herod seems more fired up than he's ever seen him. Inspired, Lauren decides it's his turn to impress Yuri and leaps into the fray. He expertly takes orc heads while dedicating his kills to the Prince of Briol. This infectious energy spreads to Bruce and the other soldiers as they join the slaughter. Yuri notices the orcs' defenses are weakening, but finds it strange that there's no sign of the main Imperial army. Their advantage is short-lived as a fresh unit of powerful orcs appears and begins crushing his soldiers. Just as an orc is about to kill Herod, Yuri steps in and pulls him to safety. He tells Herod that he's not allowed to die after only telling his epic stories once. Yuri orders him to stay sharp. Their work here is far from over. Remaining calm, Yuri swiftly faces the hulking orc and tears off one of its arms. The red banner marking the elite unit falls to the ground. Despite the victory, he can't shake the growing feeling that something is terribly wrong. Herod feels the same overwhelming sense of danger. Yuri tells him to follow as they head for the central tent. He hopes they can make it in time to help whoever is fighting the terrifying presence inside. Suddenly, a soldier comes flying out of the tent like a rag doll. And from that same tent, Karui finally steps outside, only to vanish in a blur. He reappears, lunging at the soldiers with a speed and agility no orc his size should possess, landing right in the middle of a crowd of them. That's when he starts spinning his axe, cleaving men in half with every rotation. This brutal attack leaves behind a thick mist of blood that spreads across the battlefield, turning the entire scene into a horrifying display of raw power. And amidst the carnage he has single-handedly created, Kurui stands tall. The slaughter is so absolute that even Yuri starts shaking. Realizing his men won't be able to stop him, he orders them all to fall back. His soldiers immediately clear the area. But while they retreat, Yuri walks toward Kurui, completely ignoring Jared's warning. Jared tries to follow, but Yuri simply brushes him aside. Watching this, Jonas knows the protagonist can't handle it alone, deciding he'll stay to deal with the prince while the others handle the rest. Yuri clashes with Kurui, but the orc blocks his attacks with worrying ease. In fact, Kurui smiles, as if he's already read every single move Yuri could possibly make. A chilling thought hits Yuri: if even one of Kurui's strikes lands, he'll go down instantly. But to his surprise, Jonas suddenly steps between them, declaring that the protagonist could use a hand so they can cover each other. The truth is, Jonas saw something in Yuri, the very same look he once saw in Ari. It's the look of a mother pushed to the edge, of someone carrying far too many people on her back. The only problem? The same strike that was powerful enough to destroy a wall now means nothing to this orc. Kurui blocks it with such ease that even Jonas is forced to admit he's a monster. And when Jonas attacks again, Kurui simply grabs him by the shoulder and tosses him aside like a rock in the road. Yuri, however, uses that opening to slice Kurui's palm, determined to do any damage he can. And even though he's clearly weaker, Yuri starts to mock him. He taunts that his men will wipe out the proud orcs while Kurui is stuck here, unable to do a thing to stop it. With that, the two fight together, and for the first time, their teamwork actually starts to put pressure on Kurui. But instead of crying out in pain, the orc starts shouting, as if calling for something. Just then, dark clouds completely blot out the last light in the sky. As the battlefield darkens, it fills with a deeply sinister energy. And all of that power flows straight into Kurui, making him exponentially stronger. Before Jonas can even defend himself, Kurui slams him squarely in the chest. Yet even wounded, Jonas charges the giant, telling him he'll need far more power if he wants to win. Of course, Yuri is right there to cover him. In that moment, both of them reach the exact same conclusion about the orc's sudden power-up. This power, it feels exactly like what Yuri sensed from the ghost-like sorcerer the night before, making him hope Hernando can break the magic in time. But the real problem starts when the dark energy spreads beyond Kurui's body. It begins to soak into every single enemy on the battlefield. This terrifying spell makes all of them at least 10 times stronger than they were before. And just like that, the balance of the fight is shattered once again. To make matters worse, as part of the spell, the bastards even start healing from their wounds. This allows even the weaker orcs to gain the upper hand, forcing Yuri to jump in so his soldiers aren't wiped out. Yet the most shocking part comes when he splits one of them clean in two, and it still doesn't die. Instead, a sorcerer erupts from its chest, wrapping Yuri inside a terrifying black mist. Trapped inside his mind, an unknown voice starts repeating over and over that he shouldn't resist. A giant, disembodied eye watches him, questioning why he's the only one who is still alive. Then, out of nowhere, images of his brothers being slaughtered come crashing into his mind. His psyche is filled with the people he loves, all dead, all around him, blaming him for leaving them behind. He looks down at himself only to see the older version from that other timeline, the one who ran, gave up, and threw away his duty. All the while, the voice keeps insisting that changing anything is pointless, because this is his inescapable fate. And it almost works, until Yuri just answers, "Yeah, right." With that, he begins to release his own mana technique. An incredible surge of power shatters the world of darkness around him. In an instant, he breaks free from the illusion. He even has the gall to thank the thing for finally taking him seriously, mocking it forever, thinking a little lecture was enough to stop him. For Yuri, all that talk about fate has always been nonsense. And as he wipes out the last of the darkness, he comes face to face with the sorcerer. In a desperate final gambit, the sorcerer tries to bind him once more. But it's no use. With the sorcerer dead, Yuri roars that the binding magic is finally broken. That single cry is all it takes to reignite his soldiers' fighting spirit. With renewed hope, they rally and immediately push the battle back into their favor. Yet, on another front, time is running out for Joni, as the orc Kurui proves with a devastating punch to the gut. The brutal blow sends a spray of blood erupting from Joni's mouth. He crashes to the ground, completely paralyzed. As Yuri races over to stop the killing blow, Joni screams for him to stay back. Just then, Kurui's arm goes flying, severed by a mysterious foreigner who simply tells Yuri he's done well so far. When the enraged Karui retaliates, the foreigner just grabs a horn on his helmet, calling him a plague while complaining about prison food. Before Yuri can even process the bizarre scene, the foreigner moves. It's just one swift, clean strike, and the powerful orc leader's head topples from his shoulders, ending the battle for good. Now face to face, the foreigner admits he only stepped in because their fight was interesting, even if it did ruin his own plans. That's when Yuri puts the pieces together, making it clear he knows exactly who this man is. He asks if the man let himself get captured on purpose just to reach Okuwa, and then offers his help. This offer to work together completely transforms the foreigner's challenging expression. And so, they spend the rest of the afternoon slaughtering every last orc in the camp. The foreigner, now introduced as Ragna, then launches a spear into the air, impaling Karui's severed head right on the tip, and presents it to Yuri as a grisly trophy. At that moment, Yuri realizes that in his past life, the Allied forces never won this decisively. History is already shifting. Once the dust settles, Herod reports that their losses, thankfully, weren't as bad as expected. But the worst damage wasn't physical. His men discovered scores of abused women who had been forced to give birth to half-orcs. Hearing this, Yuri orders that every single survivor must be treated immediately. On top of that, he commands his men to follow the foreigner's every request, no matter what. Later, Yuri finds the foreigner eating by a campfire, planning to ask some questions once he's finished. But the foreigner beats him to the punch. He demands to know how Yuri managed to cancel the sorcerer's binding magic. That, he says, was the most impressive part of the fight and the only reason he stepped in, so Yuri had better be honest. Because depending on his answer, the foreigner will decide whether Yuri lives or dies. From his tone, Yuri knows this is no empty threat and that lying would be pointless. So, he admits the truth. He's not entirely sure how he did it. His unique mana method just reacted on its own, cutting right through the spell. And to prove it, Yuri activates the technique right there on the spot. To his absolute shock, the foreigner recognizes the method instantly. In fact, he declares that perhaps it was their destiny to meet after all. It turns out the sect that raised him has direct ties to the technique's creator, a man named Hendrik Briol. This Hendrik apparently was a great supporter of the foreigner's ancestors. In his homeland, Hendrik isn't just anybody, he's the legendary sky-destroying swordsman. Back in the day, he was the sect leader's best friend and was crucial in wiping out the demonic sect, which is why he became such a legendary figure in the history of the lands across the sea. The foreigner explains that his sect still upholds the traditions from that very era, and that's precisely why his own technique is so similar to Yuri's. As for why he came here, his one and only goal is to destroy everyone tied to the demonic side and cleanse the world of their evil. Suddenly, the man's obsession with killing orcs, especially here in Okuwa, makes perfect sense to Yuri. And so, Yuri seizes the opportunity, offering the man not just his help, but the full support of all his troops to achieve that goal. He promises him good food, hot water, and even the title of an honorary knight. After the war, a huge reward and more money than he could ever spend would be his. With an offer that good on the table, the foreigner agrees without a moment's hesitation. However, he has just one condition. Yuri has to call him Masters. He says he sees potential in the protagonist, and he's willing to take him on as a disciple. Unofficially, of course, because joining the sect for real is a massive hassle that costs a lot of money. The problem is, the protagonist already has a master, the famous sword demon. That deeply offends the man, who insists he can have two masters just fine. For now, what matters is meeting with the allied commander. There's something he needs to tell them about the orcs. So they gather inside Ragna's tent, where the foreigner bluntly reveals that Okuwa is carrying out human sacrifices. This isn't mainly to eat or torture people. It's to fuel their black magic. That proves the whole army is already corrupted, using dark techniques to greatly raise their combat power. These are the same techniques from the last battle. Ragna agrees, puts Yuri in charge of the foreigner, and says he'll have his men investigate ways to stop that black magic. Then he asks the protagonist if it's true that his subordinate is a half-orc. When Yuri says yes, Ragna's expression hardens. He asks him to decide what should be done with the half-orcs they rescued from Curry's camp. The decision is now Yuri's to make. Things get tense when he arrives where they're being held. An Imperial soldier is arguing with Graham. The soldier thinks they should add the half-orcs to their army as obedient fighters. This would allow them to match Brill in that area. Graham argues they also need to think about the women who will never get over that awful trauma. That's when Yuri finally steps in and asks the soldier if he's really sure they would help in battle. Yuri admits that may be true, but he reminds him that prisoners of war can never be comrades. They cannot be trusted with their lives. This is a hard choice, so he asks one of the women to tell them what happened there. She recounts how not just orcs, but half-orcs too, turned their lives into hell. With a shaking voice, the woman says her younger sister was hurt. Because she couldn't move, those monsters tore her apart. They ripped off her limbs like it was for fun. When she recognizes him as the Prince of Brielle, she says she has only one request, that he avenge them. He agrees, then turns to Graham and makes one thing clear. What happens next will be done as Brielle the warrior, not as one of the allied commanders, even if the half-orcs were also victims of Karui. They became accomplices when they killed innocent people and left scars that will never fade. So they decide to wipe out every last one of them. Graham agrees to handle the execution. It goes on like that through the whole night. The next morning, something nobody expected happens. A group of orcs arrives at their front gate. They claim they have something to offer. Even though no one is foolish enough to trust those bastards, they have no choice. Ragna gives the order to open the gates. They have to see what the hell the orcs are planning. The orcs are completely relaxed while Ragna reads the document they brought. His face is so hard to read that Yuri finally asks what this is all about. The blonde man answers by asking why the protagonist thinks he became commander of the allied forces. Yuri guesses it is because he is skilled at choosing the best battle plan. But Ragna tells him to think a little more about the political reasons. He was picked for this job for a reason. He then explains that the truth is that he does not get along well with the Emperor. Logically, he should have been sent anyway, but the Empire rarely runs on logic. This is a war the Emperor expects them to lose. This way, he can make Ragna look incompetent and boost his own standing among the Empire's elites. In his past life, the Allied forces' defeat was exactly the push the Emperor needed to take full control of the Empire. Now it seems likely he already made a deal with the orcs. He is orchestrating this defeat to make that happen. Yuri asks if he is saying this is all a trap. Ragna, surprisingly honest, says yes and hands him the orc's message. The letter in Ragna's hands is damning, confirming a secret pact between the Emperor and Okua. And it comes with a dire warning: play the part of a useless commander and stop fighting, or throw his life away. The only catch is, the orcs who delivered it insist they belong to some mysterious group. An anonymous one that, supposedly, is actually opposed to Okua. Faced with this bizarre contradiction, Ragna has no idea what to make of it all. So he turns to the protagonist, asking what on earth they should do with this information. In response, the protagonist just throws the letter to the ground, and then stomps on it with pure disgust. Ragna agrees completely, knowing they have no future if they lose this war or simply give up. That's when he makes his choice. They'll keep fighting with everything they have, and he tells Yuri to deal with their so-called guests. And so, Yuri heads out to where the orc messengers are still chatting, killing all three in a single stunning strike. As his knights stare in shock, Ragna quickly calms them down. He explains that killing the messengers was, in fact, their best and only choice. After all, Yuri still has a promise he needs to keep. A promise of total revenge against those damned monsters. With the matter settled for now, Ragna summons a man called Iceman, one of the best mages in the entire Imperial Court. He asks the mage to share everything he knows about dark magic. At first, however, Iceman simply brushes the question off. He claims it's just an outdated secret that any common dispeller can easily block. He even mentions the old stories of dark magic that could revive and control the dead, but calls it all nothing more than superstition. But Ragna reveals strong rumors that Quaz is sacrificing humans to unleash spells no one has ever seen before. He suggests they may have rediscovered some ancient form of dark magic. Magic from the old nation of Adalin, which ruled these very lands long ago. People have always said the mages of Adalin were highly skilled in the magical arts. In fact, legend calls it the home of one of the 10 strongest beings in existence. A being who, it is said, still wanders that region to this day. His name is Hearth, the Death Knight. Hearing this, Iceman explains that sacrifices aren't usually used to boost power, but to summon things. This could mean that Okua is simply buying time for a massive ritual. Ragna hangs on the mage's every word, listening intently to the theory. If Iceman had to make a guess, he'd say the orcs found a dungeon deep inside the ruins of Adalvin. A dungeon containing something so important that they're desperate to reach it, no matter the cost. Later, one of Yuri's men reports that support from the Balsash supply unit has been completely cut off, most likely due to repeated attacks on their camp. But Yuri's thoughts are cut short when his horse suddenly rears up, and he screams for everyone to get off their mounts. Then, out of nowhere, a massive, impossible tower erupts from the ground right in front of them. Ragna immediately orders his mages to inspect it for any sign of a connection to the orcs. For a long moment, Ragna can only stare at the ominous structure. That's when Yuri suggests they just go inside and find out for themselves what it is. The problem is, while Ragna planned to take only his own men, the blonde commander orders a few Imperial Knights to go with them. He assigns a small team of 3 to join their party, a team to be led by a man named Rodane. Of course, Rodain isn't thrilled about dealing with Ragna's men either, but now they have no choice but to hope these knights aren't hiding anything. The group soon arrives at what appears to be the entrance, a completely sealed door. At first, Yuri starts checking the area for some kind of opening mechanism. But then, acting almost on instinct, he places his hand flat against the door. He decides to try using his mana method directly on it. As if this is the very trigger it's been waiting for, the ancient door begins to react. It slowly grinds open, all on its own. The tower welcomes them inside far too easily. To Yuri, it almost feels like the tower had been waiting for someone specific. As they step inside, the entire group is plunged into complete and utter darkness. And it's only then that they realize none of them thought to bring torches. That should mean turning back, but the protagonist decides to try something else instead. He reaches out and pulls one of the unlit torches from its sconce on the wall. Then he runs his mana method through it, praying it will react just like the door did. With a single touch, his torch bursts to life, and in an instant, so does every other torch down the entire hall. Even as Yuri insists he's not responsible for the phenomenon, Rodain remains unconvinced, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Their only path forward is a huge door, where a lone human corpse sits slumped among a field of orc skeletons. Yuri figures the man died protecting it, but since the door doesn't respond to mana, he suggests they re-examine the area. But before they can move, the human skeleton lurches to life and seizes Yuri's arm. It unleashes a blinding wave of energy, ordering them to remember this, for it is their salvation. When Yuri opens his eyes again, his surroundings have completely changed. He's now outside the tower, not in his physical body, but as a spectator within a vision. Just then, a young boy runs past, excitedly calling out for his master. That's when Yuri realizes he's not in the present, but witnessing a memory from the past. He immediately recognizes the master's clothes. They're the same ones worn by the corpse at the door. So these are the forgotten memories of the very man who died there. A shock runs through Yuri. Leaving a memory after death requires an immense, almost legendary amount of magic, which can only mean this message must be critically important. Inside the memory, the master asks the boy if he is prepared for the day's selection. But the boy refuses, declaring that he's tired of only reading books. He insists it's finally time to apply what he has learned in the real world. In response, the master simply shows him a large red crystal, explaining it's the mark of an orc hunter. Until the boy earns one of his own, he can neither be called a real hunter, nor go on a hunt. The boy pushes back, questioning why they must kill orcs in the first place. He suggests that things might improve if they just tried to talk and reach an agreement. After a long moment of silence, the man decides it is time for the boy to know the truth. And what he reveals is a shocking, world-altering fact. Orcs are not a separate species. As Yuri freezes in stunned silence, the master begins a dark story from long ago about a noble obsessed with killing. This noble was so bloodthirsty, he murdered his own people for the slightest provocations. To stop the atrocities, the king eventually passed a law forbidding it. Driven mad by his unfulfilled bloodlust, the noble was then approached by a sorcerer who offered a twisted solution. The king's law, you see, forbade the killing of humans. But the sorcerer pointed out it said nothing about turning them into something else they could kill without punishment. Following this dark advice, the noble used forbidden black magic on his own people. That magic twisted them into grotesque monsters, filled with an undying, instinctual hatred for all humans. And just like that, the noble had the perfect excuse to slaughter them whenever he wished. The horrible truth crashes down on Yuri. Every single orc he has ever killed was once a human. Back in the memory, the boy asks if the sorcerer was ever punished for his crimes. The master explains that the sorcerer fled the very moment his horrific deeds came to light. Tragically, no one ever discovered a way to reverse the curse and turn the orcs back into humans. So the orcs were exiled, and hunters came to see their duty not as killing, but as granting salvation from a terrible fate. Just as more answers seem to be on the way, the memory suddenly flashes forward in time. Now a much older man, the master desperately insists that they must keep moving. A Dawina has already fallen, he says, and they are losing the fight. Yet he declares that even if he dies, their fight still has meaning. His last hope is that the boy will survive to pass on his teachings to the next generation. But the boy, now a young man himself, knows that running is futile, he won't get far. So he chooses instead to stay, proposing they leave their memories embedded in these very ruins. His hope is that someday in the distant future, someone will find their message. These two, it turns out, were hunters once renowned as the strongest in all of Otawine. While the master fought to buy him time, the boy began pouring all of his remaining knowledge into the memory spell. Then, in a shocking turn, the boy's eyes meet Yuri's, as if he can see him directly across time. He delivers a direct and chilling warning to Yuri. Be very careful with the Devil's Tome. With that, the memory shatters, and Yuri finds himself back in the present. He tries to say he needs time to process this revelation, but the tower suddenly begins to shake violently. Rodin immediately wonders if the shaking is some kind of trap. But Yuri corrects him, explaining that this place was once an orc hunter's base. Therefore, the orcs have come to destroy it, now that the tower has risen from the plains. And while the safe choice would be to fall back and rejoin the main force, Yuri has other plans. He turns to his knights, commanding them to prepare for battle. They will face this oncoming horde head-on. Instead of retreating, Yuri declares they will stay and fight. His own empire's soldiers are stunned, questioning why they aren't pulling back. But Yuri ignores them, simply taking the old hunter's sword. He knows the best way to fight these monsters, and the sword isn't the only thing they'll be borrowing. Moments later, as the orcs try to break in, their assault is met with a sudden perimeter of hunter gems. Following his lead, the knights now move like hunters, aiming precisely for the orcs' heads and necks. Their newfound precision is so deadly, it's as if the monsters are walking straight into a perfectly laid trap. These tactics go against everything taught at Embriel, yet they rise in Yuri's mind as if he's done this 1,000 times before. It feels as if he is an orc hunter himself, instinctively wielding the knowledge his ancestors sharpened for decades. Now, when facing an enemy, he naturally knows the most vital part of an orc's body to strike. With a single fluid move, he pierces an orc's arm, taking it completely out of the fight. He no longer needs to exhaust everything he has just to battle them. In fact, he doesn't even have to rely on his soul separation. Now, he can cut off their heads as easily as if they were rats that picked the wrong predator. And knowing this power comes from the hunters, Yuri says as much out loud. He vows to make good use of their legacy, ensuring the hunters of Adelvine will never be forgotten. Later that night, Ragna seeks out Yuri, thanking him for finally securing the area around the ruins. Without sharing the whole truth, Yuri simply explains the place was once a hunter's base. He then pivots the conversation, asking Ragna if he knows anything about the Devil's Tome. Sadly, Ragna has never even heard of it. It's tied to black magic, Yuri clarifies. Upon hearing this, Ragna promises to look into it for him, but as Yuri leaves the tent, he finds someone unexpected waiting for him. It's Rodin, one of Ragna's own men. To Yuri's complete shock, Rodin admits he was seriously impressed by his performance in the last battle. His previous hostility, he explains, was just due to the Empire's strict rules on how they should act. Rodin confesses they all had serious doubts, but Yuri proved his young age means absolutely nothing. He fights like a seasoned veteran, which is ironically true since Yuri is secretly around 40 years old. The conversation takes a weird turn when Rodin asks if he has a girlfriend, prompting Yuri to immediately ask if Ragna put him up to this. Rodin plays dumb, so Yuri decides to turn this awkward opportunity to his own advantage. He counters by claiming there's already a woman interested in him. A silent mental apology goes out to Sylvia for being dragged into his lie. A surprised Rodin congratulates him, then admits he also has a girlfriend he plans to propose to after the war. Yuri's friendly demeanor vanishes as he immediately warns him not to say things like that, because that's a classic death flag, a superstition that tempting fate invites disaster. And right on cue, a massive explosion erupts behind them. Yuri just gives Rodin a sharp, "I told you so" look. The entire camp is under enemy attack. Within seconds, the whole place is engulfed in flames. Amid the chaos, the soldiers scramble desperately to protect their few remaining supplies. But to make matters worse, the group's sorcerer, Hernando, is caught completely off guard. He can't understand how hundreds of orcs got so close without a single one being detected. On top of that, his dispelling magic is completely failing him for some reason. Realizing just how dire the situation is, Yuri rushes over to get a report. Hernando reports that it feels like the orcs had already set up some kind of magical trap ahead of time. Hearing this, Yuri declares that HE will deal with the sorcerers responsible. He tells Hernando to hold the line, saying, "I'm counting on you." With that, he sprints off into the heart of the battlefield. Weaving through the chaos, Yuri carefully studies the orcs, searching for any clue that might reveal the sorcerer. He knows exactly what to look for, an orc that's moving strangely or unsteadily on its feet. Spotting one, he drives his sword through its neck like a spear, then brutally cuts off its head in one swift follow-up. His action draws the attention of the remaining orcs, who stare him down like hunters eyeing their prey. But what these monsters don't realize is that Yuri is no longer fighting alone. Because just then, Hernando's magic finally returns, allowing him to unleash a massive fire blast that engulfs the horde. Seeing the tables turn, Yuri smugly asks if they still think they have the upper hand. But then, another huge explosion erupts right behind him, and all he can do is curse himself for celebrating way too soon. As more enemies crawl from the ground, Yuri knows he needs far more firepower to survive. he turns to Fernando, desperately asking for another fireball even stronger than the last. But one look at the exhausted spirit tells him it's no use, he simply can't do it. Even so, with death closer than ever, Yuri isn't afraid. This time, he is ready to face it head-on. Because in his past life he died crawling away like a coward, and he refuses to run ever again. With total confidence, he roars for the horde to bring it on, but that's when the foreigner suddenly steps in. He says he likes Yuri's spirit, explaining that his master taught him a man is only truly alive when he is ready to die. And now, the foreigner tells him to get ready for a lesson. Today, he will personally demonstrate the legendary Chongsong sword style. With a single swing of his blade, he releases a massive, fiery wave of energy. Yuri can only freeze in absolute shock. For the first time, he is witnessing the true strength of one of the 10 mightiest people on the entire continent. But the foreigner just turns back and says the lesson isn't over yet. Inspired, Yuri immediately jumps back into the fight, trying to copy the very move he just witnessed. Watching him, the foreigner thinks to himself that Yuri is one strange kid. His techniques are rough and unrefined, yet they are all battle-tested and brutally effective. This is a boy worth watching. The foreigner decides he will stay a while longer. All around them, the chaotic battle continues to rage. Fiery blasts from the foreigner's sword rip across the battlefield, clearing huge swaths of enemies. But every new explosion just reveals more orcs pouring from the ground, pushing the situation into a full-blown crisis. In response, Yuri orders Jared and Lauren to move quickly, cutting down the orcs at their breach points. The moment new enemies emerge, the two of them rush over to the new breach points. There, they immediately start taking heads as fast as they can. The problem is, there are simply too many tunnels, and the orcs are too fast. This defense can't last long. On top of it all, Yuri gets a terrible feeling about this whole situation. Realizing there must be something else underground, he places a hand on the ground and focuses his senses. He tracks the movement below, pinpointing the source, a giant worm digging the tunnels. The second he locks onto its location, he takes off running. He heads straight for the hidden creature. Behind him, Jared and Lauren have no idea what's happening. But the blonde-haired Jared follows his prince without a moment's hesitation. His absolute faith is rewarded when they arrive at a new, secret location. There, they find the area guarded by a second orc mage. Realizing his plan has been exposed, the mage splits the ground open, letting his personal orc guards pour out. An orc leader points directly at Yuri, shouting a challenge. Though they can't understand him, the meaning is crystal clear. Each of them must take on one of the three main threats. With the matchup settled, Yuri gives his men a single, simple order. Don't lose. He is sure there's something else still down there, and he knows this battle won't end until he kills it. That makes the powerful orc in front of him nothing more than a distraction. So Yuri attacks with everything he has, hoping to end this fight as quickly as possible. Their blades clash in what appears to be an even fight, until suddenly, Yuri gets caught off guard. It happens so fast that he barely dodges in time, avoiding a serious wound but still getting cut. Now Yuri has no doubt this orc really knows how to use its blade. The orc attacks again, even harder than before, yet Yuri parries the blow. But it's clear the creature is just reading his moves, with no real interest in ending the fight. The orc is just stalling, and Yuri knows that at this rate his men will be the ones to pay the price. As worry clouds his mind, he remembers his master's words. When the mind wanders, the sword wanders too. No matter how urgent the fight, if his blade can't keep up, he'll never reach his true enemy. In every battle, there comes a moment when a swordsman must cast aside all worries and focus only on the fight. That memory instantly clears his mind, and more focused than ever, he leaps at his opponent to deliver a crushing blow. But he doesn't aim for the orc in front of him, nor does he aim for any other enemy on the battlefield. Instead, he slams his sword directly into the ground, forcing his real target to the surface, the giant worm that was digging all the tunnels. The strike is so powerful it sends out a massive shockwave, grabbing everyone's attention. Even Jared is forced to look over, wondering if Yuri can possibly be okay after pushing himself that hard. Though he still stands before his enemy, the effort was simply too much and his body is giving out. In fact, he has to plunge his sword into the ground just to stay upright. But even that isn't enough, and having spent all his strength, our protagonist finally collapses. His only comfort in this moment is the desperate hope that the worm is just as badly hurt. Sadly for him, that is not the case at all. Just then, from a distance, Lauren glances away from his own opponent. That's when he spots a new threat and immediately starts moving. Because seconds later, 4 more heads burst from the ground, ready to strike the helpless Yuri from behind. Before they can land a blow, Jared reaches him just in time, dragging him away from the fatal attack. Barely conscious, Yuri manages to thank Jared for saving his life. But Jared just snaps back that if he's really grateful, he should warn them before doing something so reckless next time. The situation is so dire that Jared even declares that dying to protect his prince would be the greatest honor. And even though he can barely move, Yuri knows sitting still isn't an option. So he orders them to spread out while he acts as bait, hoping to create a desperate opening. Just as things turn their grimmest, the entire fight is suddenly interrupted. It's Graham, arriving with a solid group of soldiers sent by Ragna to support them. This last-minute reinforcement instantly turns the tide of the battle. From that moment on, the balance swings decisively to the Alliance's side. When the dust finally settles, Yuri is recovering in the infirmary. It turns out the enemy retreated once they realized their route and had been completely blocked. Unfortunately, this also means they failed to capture anyone who could explain the real goal of the attack. Later, Ragna praises Graham, pointing out that if he hadn't arrived when he did, they would have lost one of the Alliance's most important members. Yet when he's alone with the unconscious Yuri, Ragna muses that this is exactly the kind of trial he needs to become the future husband of Trina. It's a good thing our hero can't hear him, because that comment alone might have killed him for real. Several days pass before he finally wakes up, and the very first thing he feels is an awful premonition, as if someone just wished a fate worse than death on him. But that bad feeling quickly fades when he sees Sylvia coming to visit. She gently enters his tent to check on his condition. Reassuringly, she tells him the battle ended much better than they could have hoped for. And when she asks how he feels, Yuri is shocked to realize his mana has been fully recovered. Sylvia proudly takes the credit, revealing she treated him personally with her best holy techniques. After thanking her profusely, Yuri asks where exactly they are now. With a small smile, Sylvia says it's better if she just shows him. So she helps him up and leads him to the entrance of the tent. The moment he steps outside, Yuri stops cold, staring in awe at the sight before him. They've made it. They have finally reached the Allied forces' destination, Okua Fortress. But instead of celebrating, Yuri grabs her hand and asks for a serious favor. He needs her to pretend they're dating. Completely blindsided, Sylvia has no idea what he's talking about. That's when he explains that a marriage proposal is coming from someone he desperately wants to avoid. On top of that, he argues the arrangement could also help her scare off any annoying suitors. And to his utter shock, Sylvia agrees, but on one condition.